The sea was merciless that night. Waves crashed against the cliffs as if trying to swallow the world whole, and above the roar of the storm, a single question cut through the darkness. Do you want the truth? Rosen stood at the edge of it all, wind tearing through her golden hair. Will you trust me no matter what I say? She asked softly. In front of her, he watched in silence, tall, unshaken, dressed in authority and restraint. Then he answered, It doesn't matter, and Rosen knew better than anyone how dangerous trust could be. The deeper it grew, the sharper it stabbed when broken. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. So just tell me, Rosen, if it truly didn't matter to him. Then she would tell him the truth. Are you a good liar? The man sitting across from Rosen asked calmly. Rosen leaned back in the interrogation chair, chains clinking softly at her wrists. Outside the narrow window, dark clouds loomed heavily as the Vaiheth cut through the restless sea, bound for the Isle of Monte. Not at all, she replied nonchalantly. I've never told a lie. Not once. The man's pen scratched steadily against the paper. But your file says otherwise, he said, lifting his gaze. And I've never told a lie is the exact sentence you repeatedly stated in court. Rosen leaned forward irritably, metal scraping against metal. That damn judge wouldn't listen to me. He didn't react, he simply wrote it down. What is your name? She smirked. Why are you asking that? Unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows my name. It's protocol, he said sharply. Just state your name. Rosen Walker. He didn't look convinced. That's not what we have in the file. But that is my real name, she replied, shrugging. He leaned back slightly. I don't care about that. I'm asking you to confirm the name written here. Her brow furrowed faintly. For a second, the confidence slipped. Rosenhauers, she muttered. He nodded once and continued reading. You were sentenced to 50 years at the age of 17. Imprisoned in Perrine Female Penitentiary. 1 year later, you escaped. According to this, you crawled down a cliff and climbed Dobe Mountain with your bare hands. Rosen listened patiently. You were arrested again 3 months later in St. Vin, after hiding. An additional 25 years were added to your sentence. You were transferred to Alcapez, a maximum security prison. His eyes lifted briefly to meet hers. 5 years later, you escaped again. You evaded the Imperial Army for an entire year. It also states you escaped using nothing but a spoon. He paused. Is all of this true? Rosen smiled wider. Of course it's true, and you wouldn't believe what I had to go through to get that spoon. The amount of time I had to tolerate that disgusting prison guard. He raised his hand with a quiet sigh. I don't need the details, just answer the question. She nodded lightly. Yes, it's all true. Then she lifted her gaze fully to meet his. Her smile faded. The man sitting in front of her was the famous war hero, Ian Connor. There wasn't a single person who hadn't seen his face during the war. Every time aircraft flew overhead, flyers bearing his image would rain down from the sky. When his voice echoed through battlefield broadcasts, everyone would look up, mesmerized. The government knew exactly how to fool people. A handsome young pilot was the perfect medium for propaganda, and in the middle of the chaos of war, they too had needed Ian Connor. And what was your crime? Ian asked suddenly. Rosen blinked, pulled out of her daze. What? I'm asking, he clarified evenly. What was your crime? What got you imprisoned in the first place? I didn't do it. Ian's gaze hardened slightly. As per protocol, just answer what I asked. Insisting you're innocent doesn't change the guilty verdict. Rosen glared at him. Nor does it change the truth that I am innocent. Before they could argue further, the door burst open. Commander, what are you doing? A young man hurried inside, breathing unevenly. Then he sighed. I know you're a stickler for rules, but there's no need for this. Prisoners being sent to the Isle of Monte are the worst of the worst, and... He paused, turning to point directly at Rosen. It's the Witch of Alcapez. You must not let your guard down. She escaped twice. I saw her file. She was just 17 when she murdered her husband, Hindley Howers. Both men looked at Rosen. She nodded slowly. Stabbed him 36 times, she said calmly. They called it a crime of passion, said it came from deep resentment. Her voice wavered. But it wasn't me. I loved my husband. I was a good wife. It must have been some burglar. There were so many people jealous of Hindley. They didn't even carry out a proper investigation. They didn't listen to a word I said. They just threw me into prison. She began sobbing softly. Ian looked at her without emotion. Enough with the act. It doesn't matter what kind of wife you were. You were found guilty. That's final. The sobbing stopped instantly. Rosen sighed inwardly. That didn't work. Maybe because she looked a mess right now. Ian stood up. Nobody believed you were capable of escaping. Yet you did. So what's the difference? Just because you're small doesn't mean you couldn't have done it. All evidence points to you. It's clear you're lying. He stepped forward. Henry, bring her. Henry grabbed her arm and followed Ian out of the room. To Rosen, they were gentle compared to the guards she had faced before. But regardless of who was guard and who was prisoner, it was always a cat-and-mouse relationship. The moment one let their guard down, the other would strike. And Rosen was an expert at seizing opportunities. Her eyes drifted to Ian, more precisely, to his waist. A key hung there, the key to her escape, and she was confident that this time, too, she would triumph. Has the ball ended? Ian asked as they walked down the corridor. Henry let out a long sigh. Of course. We couldn't possibly let the guests see the witch. Not everyone is as fearless as you, Commander. Many things had changed after the war. The Vyheth, once a military supply ship filled with smoke, gunfire, and wounded soldiers, had been transformed into a passenger steamer. Where there had once been blood and chaos, there were now chandeliers, music, and elegant dances. And its destination, newly redecorated and advertised, was the Isle of Monte. It was almost comical. The prisoner being sent to that infamous island was sharing the same ship with the wealthy elite, who treated the gruesome place like a tourist attraction. Ian led them outside. The wind blew gently, the sea shimmering under the moonlight. The night was beautiful, especially for someone being sent to the Isle of Monte for life. You dug the tunnel out of Alcapez and crawled through it with your bare hands, correct? Ian asked. Rosen turned to him. Yes. But why are you asking that again? She said, confused. He studied her profile. People say you used magic. Is that true? Rosen understood immediately where that rumor had come from. The last person who had escaped Alcapez before her was a witch, and that was 36 years ago. So when the media learned about Rosen's escape, they reached the simplest conclusion. She must be a witch too. After all, people are always afraid of what they cannot understand. Even in an era where magic was suppressed and science was revered, traces of the old world still lingered. Witches had diminished in number. They had hidden themselves, carefully, where they could not be seen. But that did not mean they had completely disappeared. Do you really think I would have ended up like this if I were a witch? Rosen snapped. Getting caught again after escaping? Letting you put handcuffs on me? Henry scoffed loudly. Don't let her fool you, Commander. We just saw her act. She can deceive anyone. Rosen's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice dropped to a whisper. Consider yourself lucky. If I were a witch, I would have sewn your mouth shut first. Henry stiffened. She turned back to Ian. In fact, I passed the magic stone test. What more proof do you need? Or do you have so little faith in your own army? Henry's temper flared instantly, but Ian's voice cut through the tension. Henry, hands off. His tone was firm. Or I will report you to higher command. Now bring what I asked for. Henry hesitated, then walked off reluctantly. Ian faced her again. Rosen Howers, he began evenly, you are the most notorious prison escapee in the Empire. I don't care whether you're lying or whether you're a witch. I'm simply informing you of a few facts. She watched him carefully. First, you are convicted. That verdict is final. You are sentenced to life on the Isle of Monte. Second, I was ordered to personally transfer you there. He paused. Third, there have been prisoners who escaped from Alcapez in the past, but no one has ever escaped from the Isle of Monte. It's impossible. His gaze sharpened. Even for a witch. Rosen froze. It was meant to crush her, spirit. But her eyes drifted again, briefly, to the keys at his waist. Those keys were for her handcuffs, or perhaps for the lifeboats. Either way, if she was going to escape, it had to be before they reached the Isle. Henry returned, carrying what Ian had requested. Meat. Rosen's eyes flickered with confusion. What was he planning? Ian took the meat and stepped toward the railing. Watch carefully, he said calmly. See what the ocean can do. He threw the meat into the dark water. In an instant, the surface erupted. Whales surged violently, tearing into it with terrifying force. Henry smiled coldly. See, witch? Watch what those creatures can do. Rosen's face paled. She had to think. Quickly. Anything. Ian removed his keys deliberately and stepped closer to her. Taking a lifeboat might seem like a good option, he said quietly. I noticed you eyeing these, but I hope you've come to your senses now, Rosen Howers. In that moment, Rosen realized something. Ian Connor was no gentleman. Whatever image the flyers had painted, whatever heroic voice had echoed through the skies, that man did not stand before her. To the people, he was a hero. To her, he was no different from all the guards she had encountered before, and she should have known better. With that, Rosen was escorted back to the lower prison quarters of the ship. Hey, Maria's voice rang out the moment she stepped inside the cell. Are you really not going to tell me? You met Ian Connor, right? Rosen shot her a straight look. What are you getting at, Maria? Maria raised an eyebrow, a teasing grin spreading across her face. What do you think I'm talking about? A young and pretty prisoner? And a handsome commander? Oh, come on, Maria, Rosen sighed. Ian Connor, of all people, won't be desperate enough to touch a woman. And a prisoner at that. Maria chuckled. But that worked for you in Alcapez, so why not try flirting with him? Rosen's expression turned serious. She lowered her voice. It's not that simple. The sea is filled with monsters. Maria grabbed her shoulder firmly. Hey, you're not giving up, are you? She asked, her tone suddenly sharp. Rosen met her gaze. She had first met Maria in Alcapez. And if anyone deserved to be called the Witch of Alcapez, it wasn't Rosen, it was Maria. The guards ruled the prison from the outside. Inside, Maria was queen. Anyone who dared upset her soon turned into a corpse. When Rosen had first been transferred there, she was already infamous because of her first escape. Perhaps that was why Maria had taken a liking to her. Because of that, Rosen's days in Alcapez had been far easier than they should have been. She hadn't understood at first why the other inmates treated her with such strange respect. Now she did. They all wanted her to win. They all placed their faith in her. They idolized her, believing she could humiliate the Imperial Army and escape once again. You know me, Maria, Rosen finally replied. I never give up. Maria grinned. That's my girl. She offered her a cigarette. As Rosen held it between her fingers, her thoughts drifted. Ian Connor. He used to be a pilot, she murmured. Why did he leave the Air Force and come here? Maria shrugged lazily. No idea. We just need to work on seducing him so we can get out of here. Rosen shook her head slightly. That only worked on foolish men. Ian Connor was not one of them. And besides, she was completely out of ideas. Even if she managed to steal the key and reach a lifeboat, would she survive those creatures in the sea? Obviously not. And even if by some miracle she did, she would die of thirst and hunger before reaching land. As her mind spiraled with thoughts, she heard a soft sound outside the prison room. She looked out. A little girl was playing with a ball. Rosen frowned. What was a child doing near this area? Concerned, she called out gently. Hey, you shouldn't be here. Go back to your parents. The little girl turned, and instead of leaving, she walked closer. Hello, she said brightly. My name is Lila Reville. Reville? Rosen's eyes widened slightly. Do you happen to know Henry Reville? The girl nodded happily. Yes, he's my uncle. Rosen scoffed under her breath. That foolish man let this child wander here? You shouldn't be here, Rosen repeated softly. This isn't a place for children. The girl's eyes immediately filled with tears. But I already told all my friends that I'd get to meet Rosen Walker, the famous escapee in the land. All the grown-ups said she was on this boat. Rosen Walker, Rosen murmured in surprise. The girl smiled again, her tears gone just as quickly. Yes, my grandpa is the captain of this ship, so I told everyone I'd meet Rosen. But nobody believed me. For a moment, Rosen simply stared at her. Then she smiled faintly. Well then, she said softly, it's your lucky day, Lila. Because I am Rosen Walker. Above deck, the night felt lighter. Henry was still complaining, while Ian leaned casually against the railing, laughing softly. You're overthinking this, Ian said. Take it as a vacation. Enjoy the scenery for once. Henry exhaled sharply. About that woman, Ian glanced at him. She's also from Ryerton, Henry continued. It says she was living outside the city when she committed the crime. Ian's expression shifted slightly. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine, Henry said quickly. I'm just saying, she's from Ryerton too. That's why I mentioned it. I thought maybe that's the reason you're paying her extra attention, Henry explained. Ian didn't answer immediately. Ryerton, their home, the city where they had grown up, where they had attended the military academy, where they had flown their first planes. Ryerton, the city that had later been reduced to rubble under relentless air raids during the war. I know, Ian finally said quietly. Of course you know. I gave you the file, Henry muttered. Still, it's annoying how lucky she is. She escaped when the city was being bombed, and now she's being escorted to the Isle of Monte by Sir Ian Connor himself. Ian looked at him calmly. Yes, he said. But don't forget, it's the Isle of Monte. Henry nodded. I know, but still, at least she's alive. Whether it's the Isle of Monte or anywhere else. Memories crept in, uninvited and sharp, him running, calling their names, crying as smoke swallowed the streets. And when the chaos settled, all he found was a single locket stained with blood. Inside it, a broken image of a mother and child. Below deck, Lila beamed the moment Rosen confirmed who she was. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. But, can you really use magic? Lila asked eagerly. Rosen paused. Then she smiled gently. Lila, will you answer a few questions for me first? Then I'll show you some magic. The little girl fidgeted, but Grandpa said never to do favors for prisoners. It's nothing serious, Rosen assured her softly. I'm just curious about something. Lila hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Do you know a man named Ian Connor? Rosen asked. Lila's face lit up. Yes, he's my uncle's friend, and the best pilot in the world. Are you close to him? Rosen asked. Lila tilted her head. Not really. He's a little scary. But Uncle says he loves me very much, he just doesn't show it. And he's my uncle too, I think. I'm not really sure. Rosen absorbed that quietly. Is he married? She asked casually. Or does he have a girlfriend? No, Lila replied confidently. He's not married. All the other uncles keep telling him to get married, but I don't think he wants to. Have you ever seen him with any ladies? No. Why? Lila asked curiously. Rosen hesitated. What she wanted to ask next was harder to phrase. Lila, have you ever seen Ian being compassionate? What does that mean? Lila blinked. From behind the bars, Maria chimed in lazily. Compassion means feeling sorry for someone, like letting a drenched puppy into your house, that kind of thing. Oh, Lila brightened. You mean love? Rosen gave a small, careful smile. Yes, exactly that. Lila thought for a moment, her brows furrowing in concentration. I don't think he's full of love like that, she answered honestly. But he's a good person. He's a hero, you know. Rosen laughed softly at the child's innocence. Yes, thank you, Lila. Then she leaned closer to the bars. Now, let me show you some magic. Do you have something you can give me? Oh, I have a coin, Lila said excitedly, handing it to her. But what are you going to do with it? I don't know, Rosen said lightly. When it comes to magic, you always need a medium. With a swift flick of her fingers, the coin disappeared from her palm. Lila gasped. It disappeared! Rosen smiled and smoothly slipped the coin out from behind her fingers, holding it up again. It didn't disappear, she said gently. Here. Take it. Back. It's your lucky coin. Lila clutched it tightly. And here's the secret, Rosen whispered. At sundown the coin will turn into gold. But you must not tell anyone, okay? That will break the spell. Lila nodded enthusiastically, eyes shining with excitement. Then she ran off happily. Maria's voice drifted from behind. Was that really magic? Nope, Rosen replied, waving her hand dismissively. Just a simple trick, she'll realize it soon enough. Maria gave her a look. I thought you don't lie. You always say that. Do I? Rosen asked calmly. Yes. You said if you were a witch, you wouldn't be here. Rosen lay down on the floor. But where could I possibly go? She murmured. Even if I jumped from here in the middle of the ocean? Maria paused, lowering her voice. Hey, she said quietly. Even if you can't make it all the way to land with a lifeboat, there's somewhere else you could go. They say there's a place where witches hide. No one knows if it truly exists. She was talking about the Witches' Island, Valpurgis. You've heard of it, right? Maria asked. They say it isn't far from the Isle of Monte. Rosen knew the rumors. They called it the Witches' Island for a reason. Not everyone could go there. Maria said it half-jokingly anyway, then smirked. Still, forget about fairy tales. Focus on deceiving that Commander Ian Connor. Rosen looked down thoughtfully. It wasn't easy. Using a war hero's pity sounded tempting, but the old tactics she once relied on would not work on Ian Connor. He was someone who had always been on the winning side of history, a hero, a man accustomed to triumph. So she would have to offer him another kind of triumph, not love. Tempting him with that would be easier than love. Above deck, Ian stood with Henry. He remembered the advice he had once received about Henry. If he needs to vent, let him speak, don't interrupt. So Ian remained silent. Henry's frustration shifted again as they walked. They want to make you suffer, Henry, muttered bitterly. They want to put blame on you for failing to protect Riordan. That's why they sent you here. They want you to drag down Riordan's witch with your own hands. Ian didn't respond. Everyone resents her, Henry continued. She's the only one who survived. If you personally escort her to the Isle of Monte, they'll praise you all over again. He sighed. Once this is over, you should live your life. You've got nothing but a glorious future ahead. Ian's gaze drifted to the dark horizon. A glorious future? When the war ended, he had marched beneath the Arch of Triumph. Crowds had chanted his name. Flowers had rained down around him. Had it made him happy? Had he ever felt proud? He couldn't remember. You can't protect everyone, Henry said firmly. There's no such thing as a perfect victory. You're not a god. And forget about Rosen Walker. I'll handle her. No, Ian replied quietly. I'll take care of it myself. You focus on getting better. They parted. Ian returned to his quarters and sat down. Henry's words lingered. It wasn't your fault. Those airborne missions had barely made sense. If it hadn't been for Ian, they might have failed entirely. But then, who was responsible? If he wasn't at fault for the deaths, then who was? The order echoed in his mind. Transfer the prisoners to the Isle of Monte. Pay special attention to Rosen Howers. Rosen Howers, prison escapee, born and raised in Riordan, the sole survivor of the bombing. She was alive. And he... Before his thoughts could go further, a voice broke through. Hey! He looked up. What do you want? Rosen demanded sharply. Why did you call me here? Are you even listening? Ian blinked out of his thoughts and closed the file in front of him. Right, he said evenly. Let's continue. He began repeating the regulations again. Why she was not allowed to leave the ship, why escape was impossible, why the lifeboats were guarded. Rosen's temper snapped. She swept the papers off his desk in one sharp motion. They're enough, she snapped. I get it. You don't have to repeat it. I'd be a complete idiot to even think about escaping. Do you think I'm stupid? Ian let out a slow breath. There isn't much difference between a hero and an idiot, he replied calmly. Neither lacks courage. Even you are considered an anti-hero by some. His gaze sharpened. But to me, you became an idiot the moment you chose to run. Rosen scoffed. So what? You think I should have quietly served 50 years? She leaned forward. Tell me then, hero, what should I have done? She had learned something about this man. He reacted more when she provoked him, when she spoke boldly, than when she cried and acted weak. You should have admitted to your crime, Ian answered. You would have received a reduced sentence. You might have been transferred to a lower security prison. Rosen laughed bitterly. Then I would have been in Riordan when it happened, she shot back. And I'd be dead. Her voice hardened. And I still don't understand. I didn't kill him. And even if I did, why 50 years? That's the maximum sentence for murder. Ian pointed at the document. It's written in the legislation, but... He stood up. Being sentenced to life and sent to the Isle of Monte. That was your own doing. With that, he turned toward the door. Rosen's heart skipped. If he left now, she would be back to square one. Worse, she might not get another chance. Anything would do. Even nonsense. Then what's the difference between you and me? She called out quickly. Ian paused. You said heroes and idiots are the same, she continued. Then you're an idiot too. Nobody believed we'd win the war, she went on. We're an empire in name, but we're small and weak. We fought a country that brought nations to their knees, and we won. Her voice sharpened, but only in name. What did we gain from it? Ian's fist tightened at his side. The people are broken. The land is ruined, Rosen continued, stepping closer. And you, the so-called hero, are standing here in uniform, transferring a prisoner to a place like that. She poked his chest. In the next second, Ian grabbed the chain of her handcuffs sharply. Shut your mouth, he ordered. Rosen got him, so she pressed further. So you call this a victory? She challenged. Don't talk about things you don't understand, Ian warned. But she didn't stop. She waited for his patience to snap. She braced herself. She was used to pain. She expected the blow. Instead, a loud bang echoed through the room. Ian's fist had struck the door, not her. Rosen Howers, he said through clenched teeth. You're right. She froze. But you don't have the right to say that. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with restrained fury. So many of my comrades were injured. So many died. History will not remember them. It never does. His breathing was heavy now. They lost their youth, their lives, for the public. We never expected people like you to be grateful, people who only know how to run. But at the very least, his voice lowered. Don't insult them. Rosen stepped out of Ian's cabin, her grip tightening around the cold chain at her wrists. What had she expected from that man? There were times during the war when his voice had echoed through the sky, carried by broadcasts. She had listened to it for hours back then. And now that she had heard it in person, perhaps she had been foolish enough to think that if she kept talking to him, one day he might answer her in that same calm, warm tone. What an idiot she was. You braided your hair, washed your face. Now what? Henry said sarcastically as he walked beside her. Need some makeup too? Why not? Rosen replied dramatically. Don't be ridiculous, Henry muttered, grabbing the chain of her handcuffs more firmly. Don't try those tricks. He won't fall for it. Rosen sighed. He was right, and she almost wished Ian Connor were half as easy to manipulate as this man. She smiled suddenly. Or perhaps you're the one who's attracted to me? Henry nearly choked. What are you even saying? Let's just walk in silence. As they turned the corner, Rosen's eyes caught sight of Lila again. The little girl was wandering alone. A flicker of concern crossed her face. Would she really be all right, roaming around like this? Her gaze shifted back to Henry. He was fumbling absently with the keys at his waist. They really did look alike. Rosen leaned down slightly. Your niece is adorable. Lila, right? Henry stiffened. What? How do you know her name? As he turned back hurriedly, the keys slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Rosen smiled sweetly. Don't worry, what could I possibly do in cuffs? Henry sighed as he picked them up. You really are a witch. But stay away from Lila. He turned again. That was when Rosen saw it. Lila was clutching her throat. Her small body trembled. Her face had turned pale. She was struggling to breathe. Henry! Rosen's voice sharpened. We need to call a doctor! Henry turned and froze. Hey, snap out of it! We need a doctor! Rosen shouted. But he stood there, stunned. What was wrong with him? Useless. Rosen began shouting for help, but the corridor was empty. She turned back to Henry urgently. I can help her. Uncuff me. Memories flashed in her mind. Why do we even need to learn this, Emily? She had once complained. Of course we need to, Emily had replied patiently. People die all the time during war. Human life is fragile. But you don't need this knowledge to cure people, Rosen had argued. And why should we even save them? It's not like anyone's grateful. Emily had smiled softly at her. Rosen, no one can save the world alone. Not everyone can wield magic. But there comes a time when we all require its power. The words rang clearly in her mind now. Rosen rushed toward Lila. Moments later, people began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Murmurs spread through the corridor. That young lady saved the child. Rosen sat frozen. On the floor, Lila cradled in her arms. The girl's breathing slowly steadied. After a while, Rosen whispered softly, relief flooding her voice. I saved her life, Emily. Finally, Henry snapped out of his shock and rushed forward. Lila, are you okay? He asked urgently, kneeling beside her. One of the guest ladies stepped forward. I didn't see everything, but that young woman was holding the child and performing first aid. It looked like she was choking. Rosen remained seated on the floor. Her eyes drifted to the small candy lying nearby. The one Lila had been choking on. Such a tiny thing, so harmless looking. Yet it had almost taken a life. Maybe this candy was just as lethal as a bullet. You didn't have to be a soldier to save someone. And you didn't have to be a soldier to kill someone either. You were right, Emily, Rosen thought quietly. A faint smile touched her lips. Hey, she said lightly to Henry, did you see that? If you want to thank me, she continued, lifting her chin slightly, I'd appreciate some water to wash myself. And maybe some decent food sent to my cell while you're at it. Before Henry could respond, another voice spoke. I will see to that. Rosen looked up. Ian Connor stood there. Before she could say anything, a trembling voice echoed down the corridor. Oh, my child! Are you all right? Grandpa! Lila cried, rushing into the old man's arms. Rosen watched silently. So, this was the captain of the ship. Lila's grandfather. She glanced back at Ian. I was just joking. I don't need a reward. It's not difficult, Ian replied calmly. Soldiers always pay their debts. You may be a prisoner, but you are no exception. He reached for her wrists and fastened the handcuffs back on. But this remains. Hey, Rosen protested. Then how am I supposed to wash myself? I'll have someone assist you, Ian replied evenly. Ian Connor, the old man's voice thundered behind them. Who taught you your manners? It certainly wasn't me. How dare you put a lady who saved Lila in chains? But that's the rule, Captain Reville, Ian answered firmly. Let her enjoy her freedom. For the moment, the captain insisted. Where would she even go in the middle of the ocean? I cannot ignore the law, Ian argued. That law applies on land, the old man retorted sharply. On the Viheth, I am the law. Rosen almost enjoyed the exchange. But when her eyes fell on Lila again, alive, breathing, smiling faintly, she felt nothing but relief. Captain, she is a prisoner, Ian insisted. The old man gently patted Lila's head. To me, she is the hero who saved my granddaughter. He then turned toward Rosen. Lady Howers, please forgive this foolish young man and his rudeness. Accept my sincere gratitude. Then he paused, realizing something. Oh, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself properly. He straightened slightly. I am former Navy Admiral Alex Reville. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Who hadn't heard of Alex Reville? His statue, depicting him standing firm against the enemy, was a famous tourist attraction. She cleared her throat. Captain, I am no lady. And not Howers either. My name is Rosen Walker. You probably already know. Yes, Miss Walker, he said warmly. But if it weren't for you, I might have lost my only grandchild. He studied her thoughtfully. I heard your request, he continued. But treating you like a hero inside that cell would be a disgrace. So, Miss Walker, he said kindly, if you have nothing scheduled tomorrow evening, would you do me the honor of joining us for dinner? Rosen couldn't even imagine herself sitting at such an elegant dinner table. Crystal glasses, fine cutlery, silk gowns. It felt absurd. She opened her mouth to decline, but Captain Reville raised a gentle hand. You don't need to worry so much, he said warmly. It's just family. Before she could respond, Ian stepped forward. Captain Reville, I don't think that would be appropriate. He paused. His eyes met Rosen's. What was he about to say? A murderer? A witch? Someone lowly who doesn't belong among us? Filthy? Dangerous? Suddenly, an old memory surfaced in Rosen's mind. It is always my hope that my aviation corps will better protect all of you. That gentle voice. She had listened to it countless times during the war, cheeks flushing as it echoed through the broadcasts. Now, because she's a murderer, Ian finished coldly. The voice did not match the one in her memory. Not at all, Rosen scoffed lightly. Thank you, Captain Reville, she said smoothly. I'm deeply honored. How could I possibly refuse a good meal? She accepted the invitation, cutting Ian's protest short. Ian stared at her in disbelief. Rosen avoided his gaze, but her thoughts drifted back again. Those flyers again, Rosen? Emily had once teased when she saw her collecting them. I just saw them on the ground, Rosen had said casually, gathering the papers with Ian Connor's face printed across them. Emily had sighed. You're head over heels. Just be careful Hindley doesn't see them. Rosen had only half listened. Her entire attention had been on the man in the picture, Ian Connor. It was difficult for her to admit now that she had once admired him so deeply, and each time he reminded her, through his cold words and rigid stance, that he was nothing like the man of her dreams, her anger rose uncontrollably. He should have remained nothing more than a distant fantasy. But no. Her life had always had a strange habit of dragging her exactly where she never wanted to go. The next day, an attendant arranged by Captain Reville led Rosen to a private bath. Steam filled the room. Rosen lowered herself into the hot water, and for a brief moment, it felt like heaven. She had accepted the captain's invitation only to irritate Ian Connor. But this was unexpectedly good. She couldn't even remember the last time she had bathed like this. Yet she knew better than to grow attached. Warmth had always been a luxury in her life. She had been an idiot once, clinging to small comforts as if they would last forever. Not anymore. Outside, raised voices broke the quiet. Henry had arrived. You can't go in, the attendant insisted. It's Commander Connor's order, Henry replied firmly. Hearing the commotion, Rosen stepped out, wrapping a towel around herself. What is it? She called. Do you have something to say to me? Henry immediately covered his eyes. You are aware that I'm a man, right? He muttered awkwardly. He turned to the attendants. Wait outside. I have something confidential to discuss with her. It won't take long. They hesitated, but at the mention of Ian Connor's name, they obeyed and stepped out. Rosen narrowed her eyes. So what is it? Rushing in here and forcing everyone out? Henry sighed. Just stay there. I'll leave once I'm done. Rosen slipped back into the tub behind the screen. You're a terrible liar, she said coolly. Ian Connor would never order you to come into my bath. At most, he'd tell you to guard the door. So whatever it is, say it without using your boss as an excuse. Henry hesitated. Then he said quietly, It's about Lila. Rosen's expression softened slightly. Oh? How is she? She's fine. The doctor saw her last night. Rosen nodded, but it was Henry who didn't seem fine. Are you really a pilot? She asked casually. You didn't look very brave last night. Henry fell silent for a moment. Then he spoke. I had a sister and a brother-in-law, Lila's parents. Rosen didn't interrupt. You know Ryerton was bombed during the war, right? He continued. Were you there that day? Rosen sighed softly. No, she hadn't been there. That was the day she escaped prison for the first time. It was only later, in Alcapez, that she learned what had happened to Ryerton. My sister was there, Henry said quietly. Lila was just a baby. Rosen listened in silence. When she had first heard about the bombing, she hadn't believed it. How could a city as large as Ryerton simply disappear overnight? You know, I could have stopped it, Henry murmured slowly. But I didn't. It wasn't something that concerned Rosen directly. But still, why didn't you stop it? She asked quietly. Henry exhaled. That day, we ran into enemy aircraft in our airspace. It was chaos. Their fleet split into two groups, one heading toward Malona and the other toward Ryerton. He swallowed. Malona was the capital city, and Ryerton was our hometown. Rosen listened in silence. It was Commander Ian Connor who had to decide, Henry continued. He said, "We will defend Malona." He let out a long breath. It was the right choice. I don't blame him. There was nothing more we could have done. He looked down at his hands. During the war, I kept going, but when it ended, my head broke. I couldn't fly anymore. That's when I realized I wasn't the man I used to be. He paused. But I still have Lila. The room fell quiet. So is that why you hate me? Rosen asked slowly. Because I'm the criminal who survived, while your innocent sister died? Henry didn't hesitate. Yes. Rosen nodded faintly. I see. That's understandable. Then go on hating me. Just as people needed a hero to worship, they also needed a witch to blame. Two sides of the same coin. Henry took a breath. But I came here to apologize, he said at last. Without you, Lila wouldn't be here. His voice softened. Thank you for saving her life, Rosen Walker. Outside, the attendants shifted nervously. They wanted to step in, but how could they, if it was supposedly Commander Connor's order? Then their eyes widened. Ian Connor himself had just arrived. Inside, Rosen peeked from behind the screen. Thank you, she said lightly. Then how about showing me how grateful you are? Her gaze drifted toward the keys hanging at Henry's waist. Never, Henry said firmly. Don't even think about it. Rosen smiled. Why do you treat me like that? Because I'm a prisoner? Do you really believe I killed him? Henry stiffened. What if I didn't? She continued softly. And even if we pretend I did, what if he deserved to die? Henry clutched his head. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Don't trick me. Rosen laughed quietly. Fine, forget the keys. How about another favor? She stepped closer, lowering her voice, whispering something near his ear. Henry's eyebrows rose. What are you up to now? Nothing, she replied sweetly. Just asking for a small favor. The door suddenly swung open. Ian Connor stood at the entrance. What on earth is going on here? He demanded furiously. Henry's face paled the moment he saw Ian at the door. It's not what it looks like, he blurted out. Ian's eyes shifted to Rosen, then back to Henry. Are you really going to try to convince me of that right now? He asked coldly. Henry hesitated. Well, you see, I needed to talk to Rosen Walker. Ian's jaw tightened. Get out. Now. Henry didn't argue further. He stepped out, knowing very well he was already in trouble. The door shut. Ian turned slowly toward Rosen. Without a word, he grabbed a large towel from the side. Rosen Walker, he said stiffly, pointing toward the sofa. Please sit there. She hesitated but obeyed. In the next second, he wrapped the towel securely around her, covering her properly. She looked up at him. He seemed angry, but there was something else there too. Silence lingered. He looked awkward, almost uneasy. Finally, he spoke. Did Henry do something against your will? He asked carefully. I mean, did he force you in any way? Rosen blinked. No. Ian's gaze didn't soften. You can tell me. If you want, I can arrange a different guard for you. She studied him. Why was he doing this? Henry was his subordinate. She was just a convicted prisoner, a so-called witch. Do you not even trust your own men? She asked lightly. The ones who fought beside you in war? Ian answered immediately. People are complex. He's a good soldier. That doesn't make him perfect. He looked directly at her. So answer me. Nothing happened? Rosen held his gaze, then decided to take pity on him. It's nothing like that, she said casually. We were just talking. Apparently, he was too shy to thank me in front of everyone. She smirked faintly. But trust me, I wouldn't waste my time with a big baby like him. Boring. And it's clear he couldn't give me what I wanted anyway, so what's the use? Ian's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you manage to deceive everyone? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. It's obvious, he continued. You're always looking for a chance to lie. Even now, I can read you like a book. Rosen smiled slowly. Would you like to know how I managed to deceive everyone? Ian didn't respond. Instead of standing over her, he quietly sat down in front of her. Because I didn't deceive anyone, Rosen said calmly. They just pretend to be deceived. Ian frowned slightly. What do you mean? It doesn't matter whether I'm a good liar or not, she said. People only hear what they want to hear. No one truly cares about the truth. They just need a scapegoat, someone they can point at without feeling guilty. So I say whatever I want, knowing nothing will change regardless of what I say. She tilted her head, smiling. But I suppose you really are a hero. So noble of you to even take time to worry about a lowly prisoner like me. Ian ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back. Then he looked at her quietly. Then tell me, he asked, do you also consider me a hero? Rosen laughed softly. Does it surprise you that even a criminal like me would look up to a hero? Ian rubbed the back of his neck. No, I didn't mean... I had a crush on you. Like everyone else, she said casually. The sudden confession froze him in place. Seeing his expression, she added lightly, I'm a citizen too, you know. Are you offended? I used to collect those flyers with your face whenever they rained from the sky. He looked genuinely surprised. You collected them? She nodded. It's nothing strange. You know that, right? Know what? That you're a good-looking man, she replied with a grin. The words slipped out too easily. Realizing what she had just said, her face flushed. She quickly turned away. So don't bother Henry, she muttered. And please send the cabin maids back. I need to get dressed. I won't do anything. You can post guards outside if you're worried. Ian slowly stood up. He stepped forward and offered her his hand. Rosen blinked in surprise. I'm not offended, he said quietly. I was just... taken aback. He looked at her steadily. And I think you were right. We're not that different. Her heart skipped. So let's go, he added. Go where? She asked slowly, reaching out hesitantly. To get you dressed, he replied. It's time for the dinner you were so excited about. Before she could think further, she placed her hand in his. In one swift motion, Ian pulled her up, and the next second, he lifted her onto his shoulder like luggage. Wait, what are you doing? She shouted, startled and furious. Just send the maids back. There's no telling what you might do, Ian replied firmly as he walked. I can't trust you. He stopped briefly and added in a lower tone. It was a mistake to obey the captain's order, and now I can't even trust Henry. He set her down inside the dressing room and refastened the handcuffs securely. So I'll handle it myself. He looked directly at her. Saving the child, now everyone has a soft spot for you except me. His voice remained calm. I will not underestimate you. Rosen scoffed. What? Are you afraid of me? Afraid I might escape? Ian held her gaze. Yes, I am afraid of you, he answered plainly. The honesty stunned her. He had the authority, the strength, the control. Why would he be afraid? Ian stepped back and called for the maids to enter. I'll be outside, he said shortly. He stood by the door himself, guarding it. Inside, Rosen stared at his silhouette through the gap. She still didn't understand. Why was he afraid of her? A moment earlier, Ian's eyes had fallen on the belongings brought into his study from his luggage. His brows furrowed. Among the neatly stacked items lay a file, one he had specifically ordered to be burned. Yet it was still there. Assuming it was a simple miscommunication, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were carefully collected newspaper articles, and throughout the collection, one name had been circled again and again in red ink. Rosen Walker. Ian stared at it in silence, a cigar burning slowly between his lips. At first, it had only been something to pass the time. A habit. A distraction to survive the endless days that came after the war. After the war, every night he dreamed the same dream. His aircraft spiraling down, sinking into dark water, the cold swallowing him whole. It was a nightmare that hunted him relentlessly. He knew he was not in a good place, not in the right state of mind, but no one could ever know that. He could not afford to break. He was the symbol of victory. One night, unable to sleep, he had picked up a newspaper. He read without truly reading, forcing words into his mind without understanding them. Sometimes his eyes stopped at one word, Riorton. The city reduced to ruins because of a choice he had made. But nowhere in those articles was his name blamed. Instead, they spoke of a witch, a villain, a scapegoat, a name manufactured by the press, the government, the military. Rosen Howers. From that day onward, it was as though he had been bewitched. He searched for her name everywhere. To him, she felt like another version of himself. In a way, they both carried misfortune. But if they were both simply cursed by fate, why did the world see them so differently? Why was she labeled a witch, evil and unforgivable, while he was labeled a hero, the savior of the nation? She had taken one life deliberately. He had taken more than 15,000 unwillingly. If the weight of their sins were placed side by side, whose would be heavier? Sometimes, a quiet thought whispered inside him. Run away. Don't get caught. Go far away and live the rest of your life. Witch or not, innocent or guilty. Ian Connor did not truly care, because she was the one person who had survived Riorton, the one person he had been able to save, if only by accident. Who would have imagined that the man praised as the nation's hero was in reality this broken inside, that somewhere inside he was quietly rooting for a convicted criminal to escape? Ian was sitting in his study, trying to arrange his thoughts, when the door suddenly opened. A small figure peeked in. Ian, can I come in? Lila asked sweetly, holding a bundle of toys in her arms. Sure, Ian replied, a little surprised. What are all those? I want to give Rosen a gift at the party, Lila said, stepping inside. But I don't know which one she'd like, so... Can you choose one for me? You know her best. Ian blinked. I do? Lila nodded confidently. Yes, that's yours, right? She pointed toward the file on his desk. One of the cabin maids was going to burn it the other day, but I told her not to. I brought it back for you. Ian's face stiffened. How long have you known about this, Lila? He asked carefully. Lila looked up at him innocently. Well, everyone has been collecting news clippings about Rosen, so I thought I would too. But when I looked at your newspaper, all the parts about her had already been cut out. Ian covered his face for a moment, embarrassed. Then he picked Lila up gently, taking a slow breath to steady himself. Have you told anyone about this? He asked calmly. No, not yet. He nodded. Then will you promise me to keep this our secret? Why? Lila tilted her head. Will you get in trouble if I tell? Ian gave a small nod. You see, she's a prisoner and I'm her guard. Lila thought for a moment, then nodded seriously. Okay, I don't want you to get in trouble. She hesitated before adding, but I thought you hated her. Ian shook his head. No, I don't hate her. This is just my job. I'm not supposed to have feelings about it. He paused. Besides, she saved your life, so I won't be rude to her. Lila's eyes brightened. Then, do you like her? Ian froze for a brief second. I don't like or dislike her, Lila, he answered evenly. Lila considered that, then asked, then can I like her? Ian looked at her. I know she killed someone, Lila continued softly, but she also saved me. So, she's at 0 now, right? So it's okay if I like her? Before Ian could respond, Lila held out her hand. This is for you, she said. A small coin rested in her palm. It's a lucky coin. It will bring you good luck. I think you need it more than me. You always have bad dreams. Ian frowned slightly. Where did you get this, Lila? Lila averted her gaze like a child caught doing something she shouldn't have. Ian sighed. Never accept anything from her, he said gently, even if she's not a witch. You still have to be careful. Still, he kept the coin. Throwing it away didn't feel right. Now go get ready for dinner, he added. Lila nodded, then paused at the door. But Ian, do you know where Uncle Henry is? He's keeping an eye on Rosen Howers, Ian replied. Lila shook her head. But I just checked. He was not outside the door. Ian froze, then headed for the door. As he stood outside, he forced himself to stay calm. After all, he was used to this, hiding his emotions, burying them deep where no one could see. Hey, nothing happened. You have to believe me, Henry pleaded, his voice strained with urgency. Ian didn't budge. Be quiet, he said coldly, and behave properly. I am behaving. We were just talking, Henry argued. Inside the room, Rosen stood still, listening. A flicker of worry crossed her face. Was Henry going to get in trouble because of her? Miss Howers, you look wonderful, the maid said gently, giving her a small push. Why don't you step out? Rosen stepped outside. Dressed in a soft green gown, her hair neatly styled, she looked nothing like a prisoner, more like a noble lady. Only the handcuffs betrayed the truth. Both men froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Rosen's cheeks flushed, part embarrassment, part annoyance. Why are they just staring? Say something. Henry was the first to move. He stepped forward, smiling. Miss Howers, you look great. Allow me to be your escort this evening. Rosen glanced up at him. He was good-looking. She smiled faintly and reached out. All right, I'll trust you this once. But before her hand could fully meet his, Ian stepped in. He pushed her back slightly, his gaze sharp as it landed on Henry. Henry, you are not allowed near Rosen. Henry's expression fell. I thought we already talked about this. It was a misunderstanding. We did, Ian replied. But this isn't about that. I don't trust you with this. Henry frowned. Why not? Because being too friendly can be just as dangerous as being hostile. Henry stared at him. You don't trust me? You think I'd set her free and ignore your orders? Ian said nothing. Henry's face stiffened in disbelief. This isn't about that misunderstanding, Ian continued coldly. There's no telling what kind of scheme the two of you came up with in that room. Rosen, standing beside them, felt both amused and a little guilty. He's not wrong. But she was just asking about tonight's dinner, Henry added quickly. She said there was a dish she wanted to eat. Rosen's face paled. He actually said that out loud. Ian turned toward her. So, what did you want to eat? Before she could answer, Rosen! Lila's cheerful voice broke through. She ran forward with her grandfather. You look so pretty, Lila said brightly. Hello, Lila. You look pretty too, Rosen replied softly. But you look like a princess, Lila added, stepping closer. Ian immediately stepped in front of Rosen. Lila, you can talk to her from there. Rosen watched him. Even to a child, he remained this cold. There you go again, a voice interrupted. Captain Reville stepped forward, shaking his head lightly. Why are you always so suspicious about everything? He turned to Rosen with a polite nod. My apologies, Miss Walker. Dinner will be served shortly. His eyes then dropped to the handcuffs. He paused. Instead of addressing Ian directly, he turned to Henry. Henry, would you kindly assist Miss Walker during dinner? I will do it. Ian's voice cut in firmly. Everyone turned toward him. I'll handle it, he repeated. He looked at Rosen. Any objections? She shook her head lightly. Of course not. Then it's settled, Ian said. Let's go. He grabbed her hand and began leading the way. Rosen glanced at him. Something was different. The look in his eyes today, it wasn't the same as before. Was she imagining it? No, those gray eyes, they felt sharper now, more piercing. Maybe he was right. Maybe they really were the same. Or maybe she was just deluding herself again, clinging to some fantasy to survive this reality. His eyes annoyed her. They weren't warm, they weren't cold, they revealed nothing, and yet she wanted to know what was hidden behind them. Hey, she said suddenly, pulling slightly. When are you going to let go of my hand? Ian paused, then released the chain. I was just trying to guide you. I didn't mean to. I know, she murmured, averting her gaze. She had always known. I will always protect you. Those promises had been lies, and yet she had held on to them. Because she needed something to believe in. She had fallen in love with a version of him that only existed in her mind. And now, when she needed to stay calm, she could barely meet his eyes. Get a grip, she told herself. She could no longer afford to be fooled by those lies. Rosen entered the grand hall beside Ian. The sight before her was breathtaking. The entire room glittered like something out of a dream. A servant pulled out a chair for her. As she took her seat, Rosen realized she hadn't encountered a single noble on her way to the hall. Perhaps they didn't want anyone witnessing a prisoner being treated like this. When the soup was served, her eyes sparkled with delight. She instinctively reached forward. "Walker, stop," Henry interrupted. "Are you going to eat with cuffs? And the captain hasn't begun the meal yet." "But he said the party had begun," Rosen replied. Henry sighed. "That doesn't mean we can start. We have to wait until all the appetizers are served. Don't you know proper etiquette?" Rosen flinched. How would she know? This was her first dinner party. Did they think she was some noble lady from a wealthy family? It was painfully clear she didn't belong here. Forget what he said and just eat. The calm voice beside her silenced the tension. Ian lifted the spoon and held it out to her. Rosen hesitated, then leaned forward and swallowed the soup. Ian glanced toward Henry. "You certainly didn't care about etiquette during the war, Henry." "That was different," Henry replied quickly. "And I didn't mean to embarrass her." As they bickered, Rosen quietly studied Ian. He fed her with steady precision, his expression as stoic as ever. Just look at him. He was taking care of her so delicately, without the slightest change in that cold, stony face. Ignoring the thought, Rosen began trying everything on the table. Each dish was exquisite, more delicious than the last. Whatever she pointed at, Ian obliged without hesitation, but at one point he paused and frowned. "Slow down," he advised. "You're going to choke." Rosen glared at him. "Now my eating annoys you too?" "I never said that," Ian replied with a sigh. "I'm just saying you'll regret it if you end up choking." "Then why do you look so annoyed?" she asked. Ian frowned slightly. "That's just my face." Around the table everyone nodded in agreement. Rosen blinked, momentarily stunned. It was strange. Normally he ignored her. But tonight he was going back and forth with her as if they were equals. After a brief silence, Ian spoke again. "Were you a nurse?" "No." "Then how did you learn emergency first aid like that? Or—" He paused, studying her carefully. "Did you use magic?" Rosen looked surprised at first, then smirked. "It's funny how it's always called witchcraft when a woman does something remarkable," she said coolly. "And to answer your question, I wasn't a nurse, but my husband was a doctor." She paused briefly. "A quack, actually. He didn't even have a proper license. But I picked up a few things from watching him." Of course, Hindley Howers had once had a wife who truly was a witch, but it wasn't her. Emily was the real witch. An awkward silence settled over the table, as though it had finally struck them. She was a murderer, but it had all been over the news for years, so why did he have to ask? "Miss Walker," Captain Reville spoke gently, breaking the tension. "May I ask how old you are? The newspapers were quite insistent about your age. One even claimed you were 70 and used magic to appear younger." Rosen answered calmly. "I am 25 years old, Captain." The captain stared in surprise. "Then that means—" "When you got married?" Rosen nodded. "Yes, I was 15. The captain let out a hesitant laugh. "That was rather young. Was it your parents' decision?" "No, sir. I am an orphan." Silence fell once again. The atmosphere grew heavy, uncomfortable. Henry cleared his throat. "A 15-year-old getting married? How old was your husband then?" Rosen continued chewing her food. "Why does it matter? He's dead." The table fell silent yet again. She hadn't meant to kill the mood, but it was the truth. Ian sighed softly. "Both of you, please stop this and enjoy your meal. Don't forget Lila is here." "It's okay, Ian," Lila said innocently. "I've already read the articles. I know Rosen killed her husband." A pause followed. "But it might not have been her who did it," Lila added, lowering her gaze. "Lila," Ian reminded gently, "she has already been convicted." "But she says she didn't do it," Lila argued. "Why won't anyone listen?" "Because she is lying," Ian replied firmly. "It is true that she saved you, but she also killed her husband." Lila looked down, her voice trembling. "But if nobody believed me—" "It's possible nobody believed Rosen either, and I'd be upset if it were like that." Her eyes filled with tears. Under the table, Rosen kicked Ian lightly, whispering for him to be kinder. Ian frowned. "Why did you give her that coin?" "That coin was already hers," Rosen replied. "I just performed a little trick and gave it back." She knew what he meant. He was reminding her that she had lied to Lila about it bringing luck, and therefore she was a liar. "But Rosen was telling the truth!" Lila exclaimed. "It really did bring me luck." "It's all right, Lila," Rosen said softly. "It's fine. Coincidences added up. And sometimes a lie became the truth. Children were innocent. And it was easy to take advantage of that innocence. And that was all she had done. Soon new dishes were served. Rosen's eyes lit up with delight as she gazed at them. Then her attention paused at one particular plate. "Howers, is there anything you'd like to try?" Ian asked. Rosen grinned. "Yes, I'd like to have Mary a fruit." Ian sliced the fruit carefully and dipped the spoon before offering it to her. She tightened her grip and swallowed it. "Is there anything else we can get for you, Miss Walker?" the captain asked politely. "Howers, the captain is asking you something," Ian said, turning toward her. Then he froze. His eyes widened. Rosen sat there. A thin red drop of blood began to ooze from the corner of her lips. "What's wrong, Walker?" someone exclaimed. Chairs scraped as everyone stood. In the next moment, Rosen collapsed to the floor. She had succeeded. She was sorry Lila had to witness this, but she would not return to her cell without a fight. She needed more time. Her present self knew there were no such things as saviors. Patience and anticipation only led to disappointment. She had to save herself, even if it meant hurting herself in the process. And hopefully, Ian Connor would react exactly as she expected. "Rosen!" Ian's fearful voice echoed through the hall. As darkness closed in, she shut her eyes, wishing that, even for a moment, he would be distracted. Ian caught Rosen in his arms the moment she collapsed. Without a second thought, he rushed her to the ship's medical cabin. After examining her, the doctor stepped outside. "Was it poison?" Ian asked immediately. "No," the doctor replied firmly. "I am certain it wasn't poison. When he had first been called, it was reported as a poisoning attempt. But when he arrived, the situation had been chaotic, everyone panicking, even the soldier escorted back to his cabin. The only one who seemed composed was Sir Ian Connor, and even he seemed slightly off. But that was understandable. It was a serious situation. It was simply her body reacting to that fruit, the doctor explained. That's all. Everyone else who ate it is perfectly fine." Ian's gaze sharpened. "So you're saying she did it on purpose?" The doctor hesitated. "I can't say for sure. If she wasn't aware of the allergy, then it was an accident. But if she was aware," he paused, "then it would be self-harm." Ian's eyes widened. He turned toward Rosen, lying unconscious. "Are you saying she tried to take her life?" "Well, it's not uncommon," the doctor said calmly. "She's a prisoner bound for the Isle of Monte. Many would rather die than be imprisoned there." Ian's jaw tightened. "Is she dying?" "No," the doctor replied. "I've done everything I can. She's simply fainted." "Then why isn't she waking up?" "She's malnourished and weak," the doctor explained. "It may take time for her to regain consciousness." Ian's voice grew quieter, more serious. "If she doesn't wake up, could she die?" The doctor hesitated again. "I cannot say for certain, but it is possible. Prisoners often fall ill in such conditions. Given her current state, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think she could become sick and die as a result." "Ian!" a small voice called from behind. Ian turned. Lila stood there, her eyes filled with worry. "Are you going to send Rosen back?" she asked softly. "I went there. I saw the place. It wasn't good." Her voice trembled. "She'll get sick there. Please don't send her back. Please, just let her rest a little longer before you send her back." Tears welled up in her eyes. Ian looked at her silently for a moment. Then he gently patted her head. Turning to the attendants, he gave a firm order. "Move her to my cabin." Everyone froze in shock. "Sir, she is a prisoner," one of them said hesitantly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Ian replied without hesitation. "She is a prisoner. That's why I must watch her myself." Lately, he had begun to forget his mission. And he didn't understand why. Why was he so concerned about her? She was a convicted murderer. And he was the one dragging her toward a place worse than hell, so why? "I had a crush on you, like everyone else. You were my hero, too." Her words from the other day echoed clearly in his mind. And for some reason, he couldn't ignore them. Rosen was allergic to Maria fruit. Emily had clearly warned her to avoid it. And yet, whenever life became unbearably painful, the thought of that fruit always crossed Rosen's mind. Wouldn't it be a more comfortable death? At least, compared to being beaten to death by Hindley. But this time, death was not what she wanted. If she had truly intended to give up, she would never have gone through all that effort to escape prison. Twice. Her eyes slowly opened. The room around her was unfamiliar. "Where am I?" she murmured, pushing herself up weakly. Her gaze fell to the cuff attached to the bed. A faint smile spread across her lips. At least, she wasn't back in the cell. Then it had been worth it. Still, she wouldn't do it again. Her entire body felt like it was burning, and for a moment she wondered if Lila was all right. "Miss Walker, how are you feeling?" Rosen turned. The captain had entered the room. "Oh, Captain, I didn't see you there," she said softly. "It's all right. Don't strain yourself," he replied gently. "The doctor said you need plenty of rest." Rosen nodded. "I see." The captain sat down and looked at her quietly for a moment. "Do you know how much time we have left before reaching the Isle of Monte?" he asked. Rosen blinked, startled. "We will arrive in 3 days," he continued. "We are heading west. Even though the wind is against us, sailing is easy now with steamers. Quite impressive, isn't it?" "Is this your cabin, Captain?" Rosen asked. "No," he replied. "It's Ian's." "Then, where is he?" "He stepped out for a smoke." Rosen paused, remembering. "I thought pilots didn't smoke." The captain was silent for a moment before answering. "Well, the war is over. But he's still a pilot, right? There are still aircraft to be flown." "No," the captain said. "He's quitting. He has done enough." "I see," Rosen murmured. For some reason, that made her feel sad. "He was very worried about you, Miss Walker," the captain added. Rosen let out a small laugh. "I'm sure he's regretting his decision. After all, he hates breaking rules." "You see," the captain said slowly, "he may not be as warm as the war propaganda made him seem, but he is not as cold as you think." He reached into a drawer. "Look at this." He pulled out a small glowing object. "I gave him this when he was about 12. I found it while sailing through the Kinteri Islands. It's fluorescent moss. You can see it glow like a torch at night. He handed it to Rosen. Then he took out a few more items, these as well, a pair of binoculars, and a sea chart. He pretends not to care, but he's quite sentimental. He pointed at the map. Here, this is where we are now. And this is where we started. We've made good progress. I gave him this 15 years ago. Rosen looked at the chart carefully. It seems you've known him since he was very young, she said. You could say that, the captain replied. He was a few years above Henry in military school. I suppose they were close then? The captain shook his head lightly. No, Henry hated him, said he was too strict, too stiff, called him a devil and begged me to take him home. He paused. But even without Henry, I would have noticed Ian. He stood out. Rosen smiled faintly. His parents must have been proud of him. To her, Ian. Connor was someone who must have grown up surrounded by love, a proud family, a large home, a life she could never imagine, a perfect portrait. I'm sure they would have been, the captain said quietly, if they had lived to see him grow. Rosen flinched. His parents are gone, the captain continued. He lost them both to illness when he was very young. He looked down. After that, he and his inheritance were passed from one relative to another until he entered military school at the age of 10. I believe he was tired of people fighting over what he owned. He sighed. In military school, the government takes care of everything. Perhaps that was his only escape. His voice softened. He was forced to grow up too quickly. He doesn't express emotions. Well, and even when he does, he's not honest about them. He keeps everything buried. I feel sorry for that child. It's like he was forced to grow up too soon. The captain reached out and gently placed his hand over Rosen's. Never try to take your own life. Please, I beg you. Rosen understood. That was where all of this was leading, but that's not what happened, she said quietly. It wasn't deliberate. I just wanted to try that fruit. The captain lowered his gaze. Miss Walker, he said softly. I once had a daughter too. Rosen looked at him. I see so much of her in you. She was my first child, a precious gift after 15 years of marriage. His voice wavered slightly, but she was gone too soon. Rosen didn't respond. She knew. This wasn't about her anymore. This was a grieving father speaking, seeing his daughter in someone like her. The captain stood. You still look tired. Please get some rest. Yes, Rosen replied. As he reached the door, he paused. As I said, the Isle of Monte is still far away, he added. And I believe you are not someone who gives up, Miss Walker. Rosen listened carefully. If there was one thing she was good at, it was picking up crucial details from casual conversations. Wind, direction, temperature, the route. She didn't understand everything. But one thing became clear. If she wanted to escape, she had to head east. As the sun set and darkness settled over the sea, Rosen lay on the bed, staring at the small glowing object the captain had given her. It truly shone in the dark. Like a lighthouse, the kind of light that made you feel relieved after being lost at sea for too long. Now, she only needed a key. If she could get that from Ian Connor, and perhaps a gun as well, then what? She would be lying if she said those creatures in the ocean didn't terrify her. But she also knew how to overcome fear. A memory surfaced. Emily, run away to Valpurgis. You're a witch. You can do it, Rosen had shouted. But what about you? Emily had asked, her voice trembling. I won't die, Rosen had said firmly. I will survive, I promise. That day, it had been the first time Rosen had done something brave, a rare, shining moment in her otherwise miserable life. When she looked back at it now, it felt like a blue flame burning inside her heart, a flame that melted away fear and turned it into something lighter, something that allowed her to rise again. We will meet again, I promise. She had made that promise, and that fire still burned within her. No matter what, no matter who stood in her way, she would never accept defeat again. The door opened. Ian stepped into the cabin. Rosen immediately stood up, loosening the lace of her dress slightly. Where have you been? She asked, her tone soft, deliberate. I was waiting for you. She tried to seduce him, but Ian remained unmoved, his expression as cold as ever. How are you feeling? He asked instead. Rosen's face stiffened. So he was going to ignore it? I'm fine, she replied, forcing a smile. But where were you all this time? I was guarding the door. His tone was calm, matter-of-fact. Why work so hard? She said lightly. A normal person would just have one of his men do it. It's not that big of a deal. A minister ordered me to personally oversee you, Ian replied. You underestimate yourself. Your fame exceeds mine. Rosen let out a soft laugh. My infamy, to be exact. She tilted her head. So what now? Dinner is over. Are you sending me back to my cell? No, Ian said. Your condition isn't good. Until we reach the Isle of Monte, you'll stay here. Rosen smiled faintly. That's fine with me. But where will you stay? A spare room? Ian looked at her. This is my cabin, he said. Where else would I go? I'll sleep on the couch. His eyes narrowed slightly. And you'll try something the moment I leave. I can already see it on your face. Rosen's gaze flickered to his waist. The key was gone. He wasn't joking. He wasn't that careless. She laughed lightly. What are you talking about? You think I'd try to jump into the ocean? Ian's expression hardened. You tried to kill yourself. I'm not taking any more chances. So you're going to tie me up in this room? Rosen shot back. Didn't the captain tell you? I wasn't trying to kill myself. You clearly knew you could die from eating that fruit, Ian said sharply. That's why you specifically asked Henry for it, so don't make excuses. Rosen flinched. Wait, let me explain, she said quickly, but Ian finally turned fully toward her. Was it fun for you? He asked, his expression hurtful. You made me feed it to you, he continued, with my own hands. Rosen stared at him. For a brief moment, was he angry? She had been observing him for days. Ian Connor was not someone who raised his voice or gave in to emotion. He was always controlled, always rational, and if he had thought rationally, he would have known there was no way she had truly intended to kill herself. But right now, it was as if he had lost that control, and if that was the case, then she had to take this opportunity. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to sob. You're right, she whispered weakly. What's the point of living? I'm going to end my life. Only torture and hard labor await me anyway. Ian watched her closely. She didn't hesitate to take advantage of his concern. Not now. You think you can die on me? Ian said sharply, grabbing her chin. I will never let that happen. His grip tightened. If these chains aren't enough, I'll tie down all your limbs to this bed. Rosen frowned. Are you insane? Maybe I am, Ian replied through clenched teeth. But if you try anything again, I won't let it happen. What if I bite my tongue? I'll gag you. Then I'll hold my breath. Stop talking nonsense, Ian snapped, tilting her chin upward. You can't die by holding your breath. His voice dropped, confusion slipping through. I don't understand. He looked at her, searching. You went through all that just to escape prison, so why are you doing this now? Why are you giving up? Rosen's eyes hardened. You have the audacity to ask me that? She shot back. It's because I can't escape, and you're the one who told me that. Her voice rose. You showed me those creatures. You scared me. It was him. He had told her to give up, to accept her sentence. So why was he saying this now? I was just being cautious, Ian said quietly. I never imagined you would do something like this. He paused. I know you're not someone who gives up until your last breath. Rosen stared at him. He knows me? What could he possibly know about her? The Witch of Alcapez. The murderer. You know me? She scoffed. Who are you to say that? Her voice turned sharp. Answer me, Sir Ian Connor. What do you know about me? Ian exhaled slowly. Don't get angry. Of course, I don't know you that well. His hand moved gently, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. But I know more than you think. What are you trying to say? Rosen pressed. I don't understand. Be clear. Ian fell silent. For a moment. Then, in a low whisper, he said, Don't die. Rosen froze. What? Please, Ian added quietly. Promise me you won't do anything like this again. At least, not while we're on this ship. Why should I? Rosen asked coldly. For whom? This is my last chance to mess things up for you. Why would I give that up? Ian didn't deny it. Yes, he said. You won't survive there. You won't be able to escape either. He stepped closer. But listen, I'm going to make you an offer. He reached down and unlocked the cuffs on her wrists, then her legs. Hey, what are you doing? Rosen asked, startled. But Ian ignored her and pulled her up to her feet. For the first time, she felt light, free. I'll let you walk freely in this cabin, he said. Under my watch, it won't be for long. But you'll get proper sleep, good meals. His voice softened slightly. Take this time to look back on your life. He paused. At least until we reach our destination. Promise me, Rosen, you won't try anything like that again. Rosen looked at him. How strange. He wanted her to promise she wouldn't take her own life. And he sounded genuine. What was he trying to do? But for now, she just needed to play along. Okay, she whispered softly. I promise. She didn't have much time anyway. They would reach the Isle of Monte in 3 days, so she had to act. From now on, she would behave like someone who had given up, someone simply enjoying the last bit of freedom she had been granted. And for that, she needed something. Booze, she said lightly. Get me some booze, something strong, and please, I'm dying for a smoke. Ian looked at her. Please, she added, almost playfully. Even a prisoner on death row is granted a final wish, right? Ian let out a quiet sigh. Without a word, he offered her his pack. Rosen took a cigarette and lit it, inhaling slowly. As for alcohol, Ian said, watching her, I'll get it for you tomorrow morning. Sure, she replied, smiling faintly. Smoke drifted into the air as Rosen's mind began to race. After this, he would tell her to sleep. She couldn't let that happen. She needed to keep him talking, to gather more information. But what could she ask without making him suspicious? I have a question, Sir Ian Connor, she said casually. What? He replied. When did you start smoking? It's discouraged among pilots. Toward the end of the war, he answered. What made you start? She asked, keeping her tone light. Ian glanced at her. Why? Is it a problem? No, Rosen shook her head. It just doesn't seem like you. You're a pilot. To her, he belonged in the sky. That was where he shone the brightest. Whenever his aircraft passed overhead, she used to reach up with both hands, as if she could catch it. She never cared whether they won or lost the war. Because she had been too busy, worshipping Ian Connor as he soared through those blue skies. She had fallen in love with that feeling, that sense of freedom he carried with him. Not anymore. And the war is over, Ian answered calmly. Rosen turned toward him. Then why aren't you married? The question caught him off guard. He frowned. That's none of your business. Well, it's not just me, Rosen said lightly. All your fans across the Empire are dying to know. Ian looked away slightly. There's no telling when a pilot might die in war. I'm better off without a family. Rosen tilted her head. So you're saying no soldier should get married? You went to war without even a picture of your sweetheart stitched into your helmet? Ian gave a faint grin. Maybe some do things like that, but not everyone. Rosen blinked. Was it just her imagination, or did he actually smile? You're too dry, she said, half teasing. No offense, but you're very different from what the media made you out to be. I suppose, Ian replied. Did they force you to become the poster child of the war? She asked. Well, someone had to do it, he said simply. Rosen let out a small laugh. It's your fault for being good-looking. Still better than wanting the role and not having the face for it, right? Ian's lips curved slightly. Again. Is it? Rosen blinked once more. He's smiling. But I don't think people need to get married, Ian added. Rosen smiled. If I were you, I'd have at least 3 wives, and honestly, it would be better for a wife to share you than end up with some loser. She giggled softly, then added, more casually. But from experience, I think a woman doesn't really need a man in her life. She paused. Of course, that doesn't mean I killed Hindley. You know that, right? Ian frowned. Don't talk nonsense. The Empire abolished polygamy long ago. Rosen laughed. You really know nothing about real life, do you? That might be true for the rich people like you. But in the countryside, it's common for men to have more than one wife. She tilted her head slightly. Want to know something? Ian remained silent. I was Hindley's other wife. A quiet pause followed. Of course, you didn't know, Rosen added calmly. How could you? I never told anyone. Ian's expression didn't change, but his silence deepened. I think it's time for bed, he said at last. Rosen stood up slowly. Don't you want to know more? She asked. She stepped closer, then, without hesitation, slid onto his lap. Leaning in slightly, she smiled. You see, I can tell you secrets far more entertaining than anything you've read in those newspapers. Ian looked at her. Rosen smiled faintly, thinking her plan was working, but then, I'm not interested in the least, Ian said flatly. Before she could react, he pulled her off and laid her back onto the bed. Rosen lay there, annoyed. That completely failed. But she couldn't just go to sleep like this. She had to keep him talking. Hey, she called out. Aren't you going to cuff me? I can do that before I go to bed, Ian replied calmly. Aren't you going to bed then? She asked. I don't need much sleep. Rosen narrowed her eyes. Don't need much sleep. Or you can't fall asleep. Both, he answered without hesitation. She studied him. He did look tired. After a moment, Ian picked something up and handed it to her. Rosen blinked, then frowned. Hey, I'm not a child. It's a gift from Lila, Ian said simply. Rosen paused. Why didn't you say that earlier? She hugged the toy quietly, then looked down at it. Tell Lila I said thank you, she murmured. Now go to sleep, Ian said. Rosen scoffed lightly. Hey, would you be able to sleep knowing you'll die in 3 days? I can get plenty of sleep. After that, anyway. So what are you planning? Ian asked. Staying awake for 3 nights? Rosen smirked, then her tone shifted slightly. But seriously, don't you want to know the truth? Ian pulled the covers over her. I already know the truth. Now go to... Before he could finish, Rosen grabbed his hand. No. Her grip tightened. I'm going to talk until I fall asleep. I don't care whether you listen or not. She looked at him, her voice quieter now. How a story unfolds depends on who's telling it, doesn't it? So shouldn't at least one person hear my version? Her fingers curled slightly around his hand. I don't care whether you believe me or not. I know you never will. She exhaled softly. But it doesn't matter. It's all in the past now. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. So, please, just listen to my story. I'll start from when I was 15. Until then, my life was rather boring, and this time, Ian didn't interrupt. He listened. Rosen's memories from before the age of 15 were hazy, blurry, but everything traced back to one place, the orphanage in Rearton. She had spent 15 years there, an orphanage where punishment meant being beaten, where no matter how young you were, or how sick, you still had to work to earn your keep. Life was hard, but Rosen never questioned it. She didn't know any better. She simply believed that was how life was for everyone. Until one day, she caught a glimpse of something else. It was a cold day. She had been sent out to do laundry. Snow was falling gently over the city, and it happened to be Valborg's Day. At first, she didn't know what it was, but later she learned Valborg's Day was a night of celebration, held once every year, a festival to honor the birth of the greatest witch in history. Even now, sometimes. Rosen wondered, if I hadn't looked into that window that day, would my life have been different? Maybe she could have lived a dull, quiet life, without hope, but also without despair. That day, she had paused outside a house, and through the window, she saw a family. They were gathered around a table laughing, wearing clean new clothes, eating warm food. She couldn't hear their voices clearly, but she understood. A child received a toy from her father and threw her arms around him happily. "I love you," the father whispered. Rosen couldn't hear it fully, but she read it from his lips. That night, back at the orphanage, she sat there in silence, bewildered. Love. She had always thought those words belonged only in plays or novels. But that wasn't true. People said them in real life, parents to their children, lovers to each other. And suddenly, an unbearable sadness settled inside her, because for the first time she realized no one had ever said those words to her. The night felt colder than ever. She wanted something, anything, to warm her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She had always thought crying was weakness. As a child, the sound of others crying had irritated her, because crying didn't change anything. But now, she understood she had been wrong. They weren't crying because they were weak. They were crying because they had once known warmth, and lost it. And so they were able to recognize what a sad, desolate place they now found themselves in. Unlike them, Rosen had never known that warmth. And that night, she finally understood what that meant. She was alone. On St. Valburg's Day, people lit candles. They prayed to Valburg, the greatest witch, to grant their wishes. That night, Rosen made one too. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Oh, Valburg, please take pity on me. I don't care who it is. Just send someone to hold me. Someone who will tell me they love me and truly mean it." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And if that's too much to ask, it's okay. Even if they don't mean it, I just need someone to wrap me in a warm embrace." "Rosen! Rosen!" a voice called out. Rosen blinked, coming out of her daze, and turned toward it. "Did you call me?" she asked. "Yes," her friend replied, watching her closely. "What's with you these days? Is something wrong?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Or, is it because your birthday is coming up? Girls over the age of 15 have to leave the orphanage, you know." Rosen didn't look up. She continued washing the dishes, her hands moving mechanically. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm sure I'll be sold off as a maid, or as a concubine, and the money will go straight to the headmistress." She paused, then added under her breath, "Better to be a concubine than a maid." Behind her, a few of the other girls began arguing. "A concubine is just at the mercy of her husband," one snapped. "And maids are safe," another shot back. "They're no better off. They're still at their master's mercy." The voices rose, tension filling the small space. Then suddenly, "Rosen!" A girl rushed in. "The headmistress is calling for you. Someone is here to see you." Rosen turned, startled. "Someone came to see me?" Inside the office, the headmistress sat before a well-dressed man. "Would you mind waiting for a moment?" she asked politely. "She won't be long." "Of course," the man replied with a gentle smile. "It's no trouble at all to wait for a lady." His gaze softened slightly. "I look forward to seeing her up close." Inside the room, Rosen felt restless. Should she wear her best dress? Should she put on some makeup? But if all they wanted was a maid, then there was no point in trying to look pretty. Taking a quiet breath, she finally stepped into the headmistress's office. "Hello?" she greeted softly. "Oh, Rosen, come here, child," the headmistress said with a warm smile. Rosen's eyes shifted toward the man standing nearby. All the girls had been whispering that her future husband would be some old man, but the moment she saw him, her eyes widened. "This is your groom-to-be," the headmistress said, "Mr. Hindley Howers." The man stood up and turned toward her. "Hello, Rosen Walker," he said with a polite smile. Or perhaps I should say, Rosen Howers. Soon to be, at least. Rosen greeted him back, but her mind was still in shock. He was younger, of course older than her, but not old. He looked normal. "Are you certain she's healthy?" Hindley asked, his gaze scanning Rosen. "You see, I need her to give me plenty of children, but she looks rather skinny." "Oh, Mr. Howers," the headmistress chimed in smoothly. "You've already seen her medical records, and, well, that will depend on you now. Dr. Robinson himself vouched for her." Rosen straightened slightly. She smiled brightly, trying her best. If he didn't choose her, she might end up somewhere far worse. Hindley nodded after a moment. "I suppose she'll look better after a proper wash." "All right. I'll take your word for it." "Perfect," the headmistress said quickly. "Please sign here, Mr. Howers." He paid in cash. Rosen sat quietly in her chair, relief slowly settling in. It had worked, and he seemed kind. She felt a small sense of happiness. "Ah, Rosen, could you give me your hand?" Hindley said gently. "Yes," she replied, startled, looking up at him. He took her hand and slipped a ring onto her finger. "It fits just right," he murmured. Rosen stared at it closely. Was this a dream? No, it was real. "You see," Hindley continued, smiling down at her, "I've been watching you for quite some time. You were the one I liked the most out of all the girls here." Then, as if remembering something, he pulled out a small teddy bear and handed it to her. In that moment, Rosen felt certain. Valburg had answered her prayer. She was going to fall in love with this man. And that was how Rosen first met Hindley Howers, and became Rosen Howers. Soon they arrived at Hindley's home. As they stepped inside, Hindley explained calmly, "The first floor is my clinic. The living quarters are upstairs." Rosen looked around quietly. The place felt warm, clean, beautiful. "All of this is for you," Hindley said softly, showing her all the pretty things. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "Do you like it?" he asked. Rosen turned happily and hugged him back. "Yes," she said sincerely. "Thank you, Hindley." And she meant every word. After coming here, she never went hungry again, and she never had to sleep in a cold bed. The nights they spent together were painful for her, but bearable, because she was happy, at least in the beginning. Hindley behaved like a gentleman. Unlike the people at the orphanage, he never beat her, but after a few weeks, he began to show his true colors, and Rosen's happy days came to an end. "Is this it?" Hindley said one morning, staring at the breakfast table with annoyance. "It's the same as yesterday." Rosen froze. He had never spoken like that before. "It's not the same," she tried to explain. But Hindley suddenly stood up and pointed at her temple. "And now you talk back to me?" His voice turned sharp. "When I'm speaking, you listen. Such a worthless woman." His gaze darkened. And for a moment, Rosen couldn't believe what she was hearing. The door slammed shut behind him. Rosen remained standing there silently, unable to process what had just happened, but eventually she forced herself to calm down. Maybe he was just in a bad mood today. She told herself not to cry. She had gone through far worse than this before. It was okay. It wasn't too late yet. Tomorrow, she could start by making something new for him. And if he ever became physical next time, then she had to make sure he would never abandon her. The next day, Rosen prepared a new dish for him. Hindley glanced at the table. Rosen stood nearby anxiously, watching him take a bite. Then he looked up. "Rosen," he called softly. "Come here." Rosen swallowed hard and stepped forward, preparing herself for a strike. But instead, Hindley slowly raised his hand and patted the back of her head. "It tastes good," he murmured. "See? You can do it. So why were you slacking all this time, A faint smile appeared on his lips. "I think you became too comfortable." Then he pulled her into a hug and whispered near her ear, "Never get too comfortable with your husband. You want to end up a lazy old cow, huh?" He chuckled quietly. "I'll let you off this once because I'm still fond of you, so don't make me hate you, okay?" Rosen listened quietly, and after that, her life completely changed. Every dawn she woke up early and started preparing breakfast for him. Then she cleaned the house in between before immediately preparing lunch. While Hindley took his naps, she hurried outside to buy groceries. For some reason, Hindley stayed home all the time, and he still hadn't opened his clinic. Because of that, Rosen barely had any time to rest. But despite all her effort, after only 2 months, she ran out of new recipes. Around that time, she began having nightmares, dreams where Hindley grew furious, beat her, and sent her back to the orphanage. One day, she carefully asked, "Hindley, when are you going to open the clinic?" "Soon," he answered shortly. "But why did you close it?" Hindley slowly looked up. "That's none of your business." The slap came suddenly across her cheek. "I warned you, Rosen," he said coldly. "I hate noisy women." Rosen immediately apologized. Things were becoming harder. He had isolated her from everything in this unfamiliar place. For some reason, he even forbade her from speaking to the neighbors. So in the end, she had no one else but him. Rosen tried her best not to lose his affection. She stayed quiet, stopped asking questions, and simply did as she was told. But even that fragile peace shattered forever, only 3 months after she moved in with him. Because one day, a strange woman arrived at their door. "So that woman, Emily, was she the first wife?" Ian asked. Rosen looked at him in surprise. It was unexpected. He was actually curious enough to ask something. A small smirk appeared on her lips. "What do you think?" she teased, lightly. "Take a guess." Ian stared at her calmly. "You said all I had to do was listen," he reminded her. Rosen laughed softly. "That was then." She tilted her head slightly. "But were you always like this? Back in the academy too?" "If you're done with your story, go to bed," Ian said firmly. Okay. "No need to be grumpy," Rosen murmured. "Anyway, I already know the answer. I'm sure you had that same sullen expression back then, too. Honestly, I'm surprised Henry hasn't run away from you by now." Ian quietly listened. Then, without meaning to, his thoughts drifted back to when he was young. What was he like back then? He remembered the day he left for military school. His caretaker, Rosalie, had looked worried. But Ian had been strangely happy. "It's okay, Rosalie," young Ian had said calmly before leaving. "I'll finally be able to get some peace. Take care of yourself." At least there, his relatives would no longer drag him into their unpleasant affairs. "Hi, is this seat free?" Ian looked up. A girl stood there, smiling brightly. Without waiting for an answer, she sat beside him. "I'm Illyria," she said cheerfully, "but you can call me Rhea. What's your name?" "Ian Connor," he replied calmly. The girl's eyes widened with excitement. "Oh, I heard you ranked first in the exams. That's so cool." She grinned brightly. "Let's be friends." Ian slowly nodded. She was far too talkative. He already had a feeling she would make concentrating in class difficult. Still, whenever Rhea saw him, she always called out to him first. And Ian, no matter how hesitant, always greeted her back. One day after class, Rhea ran up to him again. "Ian, if you're done, want to come play cards with us?" "No," Ian answered immediately. "I still have a book to finish." He turned and walked away. Behind him, another girl whispered to Rhea, "Why do you even bother with him? He acts like he's above everyone. He clearly doesn't want to be friends with us." But Rhea only watched Ian's back quietly as he left. Ian sat alone in the library later that evening. For him, there was no time for games. He had to work harder. Then suddenly, He looked up in surprise. Rhea had sat down across from him again. "Don't worry," she said quickly. "I won't disturb you. I'm here to study for the test." Ian stared at her for a moment. "I thought you hated me," he said bluntly. Rhea blinked. "Oh, so you heard that. I thought you didn't care." Then she leaned forward slightly. "They just don't know you. Honestly, I don't know you either, but even though you look arrogant and unfriendly and don't exactly fit in, you always say hi when I call you, and you work harder than everyone else, in classes, training, everything, so I'd like to get to know you better." She tilted her head. "How about it?" For the first time, a faint grin appeared on Ian's face, and that was how Ian Connor made his first friend, Elitia Reve, the girl who would later become a member of his aviation corps. Several years later, a new junior arrived at the academy. He was the son of a famous war hero, Henry Revel. "Hey Ian, have you seen who you got paired with?" Rhea asked curiously. "Are you really okay being his mentor?" Ian looked back at her calmly. "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "Well, he's famous," Rhea replied, "and you have to share a room with him too. We don't even know what he's like." Just then, the dorm room door opened. "Excuse me, is this room 1053? Ian nodded. The boy stepped inside confidently. "Hi, I'm Henry Revel. Nice to meet you." He offered his hand. Ian looked at him quietly before taking it. "Ian Connor," he replied with a small smile. "Nice to meet you." And that day, Ian made what was kind of his second friend. That night, Henry lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. His new roommate had guided him around the academy and explained everything in perfect detail, but honestly, Ian Connor was such a bore, a complete nerd. Still, since Ian was his mentor, things would probably be easy for him now. So Henry decided there was nothing to worry about. At least, that was what he thought. The next morning, training began. Henry completed his run in 12 seconds. Of course, he hadn't used his full stamina. No point showing off too much. But Ian Connor was not someone easy to fool. "Judging by your height and entrance records," Ian said calmly, "you didn't give it your all. Am I wrong?" And just like that, Henry was forced to run again. And again, and again. What is this guy's deal? Henry thought bitterly. No matter what he did, Ian always found another reason to make him continue. Only now did Henry finally understand why everyone had pitied him when they found out Ian Connor would be his mentor. "Oh my God," Henry groaned internally. "Am I going to train like this every single day?" Just imagining it gave him chills. One night, Henry finally decided he had enough. Training at 5 in the morning? Ridiculous. Smirking to himself, he quietly snuck out of the room. "Let's see you find me now." Then suddenly, "Henry," Ian's voice came from behind him. "It's not 5 in the morning yet." And that night, the entire dormitory heard Henry's scream. The next morning, Henry once again collapsed onto the ground after training, panting heavily. Rhea approached with a grin. "Is Ian being too tough? Our precious Master Revel must be exhausted." Henry slowly sat up. "What do you even know about me?" he snapped suddenly. "You think I've had an easy life just because I'm the son of a war hero?" His fists clenched. "Everyone's always watching me, waiting for me to make one mistake so they can judge me. I'm always in the spotlight. If I show everyone everything I've got now, then what will I have left to prove later?" A brief silence followed. Then Henry sighed awkwardly. "Well, maybe I shouldn't have said all that. Sorry." He stood up and walked away. Rhea quietly watched his back. For a moment, he reminded her of someone she knew. Meanwhile, Henry was dying inside from embarrassment. What was I even saying? What if Rhea told Ian Connor everything? As he walked through the academy grounds, a few classmates approached him. "Hey, want to come with us?" They were planning to sneak out. Henry had no interest and immediately refused. But one of the boys grabbed his wrist. "Oh, come on. It'll be fun." Henry pulled his hand away quickly, accidentally scratching the boy's arm in the process. "I'm sorry," Henry said immediately. "I didn't mean to," but the boy scoffed. "You think you're special or something? We only invited you because of your father." His expression twisted mockingly. "Let's see what happens once rumors spread about the great war hero's son being a bully." Nearby, Ian happened to be passing by and overheard the conversation. Henry stayed silent, until the boy smirked and added, "Wouldn't everyone love to see your father begging for forgiveness?" Before he could finish, Henry punched him. He was already furious at himself, and those words only pushed him over the edge. Did you really do this, young Master Connor?" The principal looked at Ian from across the desk. Ian sat calmly in front of him. "Yes, sir," he replied without hesitation. The principal sighed heavily. "So you are saying you started the fight, and young Master Revel was merely trying to stop it?" "Yes, sir. You understand you cannot escape punishment for this, correct?" the principal asked again. Ian's answer remained the same. "Yes, sir." The principal rubbed his forehead in exhaustion before finally speaking. "You are suspended for 1 week, young Master Connor." Ian simply nodded and stood up to leave, but just before he stepped, the principal spoke again. "And young Master Connor," Ian paused. "I assure you we will not overlook this kind of behavior next time. I hope Master Revel understands that as well." Ian quietly nodded before leaving the office. Outside, Henry was waiting anxiously. Ian approached him calmly. "Cool off for a bit," he said, "and finish your assigned chores. Why did you do that? Henry asked in frustration. Why get yourself suspended? He ran a hand through his hair. And how did you even pull this off? Normally, they would have called everyone's parents. Ian sighed lightly. I spoke to the boys first, he explained. They've sneaked out before too, so they were already scared of their parents finding out. Then he added calmly, and as for me, I don't have any parents to call. Henry froze slightly. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Ian turned away. Let's go, he said quietly. And be more careful from now on. Henry followed behind him silently before finally muttering, I thought you hated me, for being the arrogant son of a war hero or whatever. Ian glanced back at him. At least you know you're arrogant, he replied calmly. But, Ian continued, that's not a reason to hate you. Maybe you thought that because of the training. But I was only making you do what I do. His voice remained steady. Being easy on you won't help you. Once you enter this academy, no matter how young you are, you're training to become a soldier. So that's how I see you, as a soldier. A quiet silence followed before Ian spoke again. There's no telling when war will break out. His expression darkened slightly. And when we're on the front lines, if you don't give your all, you'll die. So for me, Ian continued quietly, it doesn't matter what other people think. I just don't want to see anyone I care about die. And after that day, Henry became inseparable from Ian. Almost like a younger brother following him everywhere. After a few years, the war finally broke out. And despite being so young, Ian was assigned his very first mission as commander. Commander Connor! Henry called out from behind and hurried toward him holding a newspaper. Did you see the announcement? He looked shocked. Well, congratulations, I guess, he muttered. But they seriously must have lost their minds. You're barely 20. The Air Force is always lacking personnel, Ian replied calmly. So focus on your training. It could be your turn any time now. Henry sighed dramatically. I'll become top of the school once you're gone. Then his voice slowly lowered. Just don't die. Ian looked at him quietly. And make sure to tell Lieutenant Illyria too, Henry added awkwardly. As you said, I also don't want to see anyone I care about die. His expression turned unusually serious. So don't you dare go dying on me. Ian stared at him for a moment, then slowly nodded. Ian Connor. Rosen's voice pulled Ian out of his thoughts. Ian looked up slightly startled. What were you thinking about? Rosen asked, resting her chin on her hand. You completely blanked out for a moment there. Ian sighed quietly. Nothing. If you're done for today, go to sleep. Rosen smirked immediately. I'm not even slightly sleepy. And now that you're back, listen to the rest of my story. Even though you still won't tell me yours. Then she tilted her head. You asked me about Emily, right? One morning, Rosen heard loud knocking at the door. She hurried to open it, only to find a young woman standing outside. Emily stared at her in confusion. Rosen was around her age. Who are you? Emily asked immediately. I'm Mrs. Howers, Rosen replied politely. For a moment, Emily froze. Then anger suddenly rushed across her face as she pushed past Rosen and entered the house. Wait! Rosen tried to stop her, but before she could, Hindley stepped out from inside. What is going on? He asked irritably. Something suddenly flew toward him. Are you insane? Emily shouted furiously. Have you completely lost your mind? Her voice trembled with rage. Taking a new wife while your old wife is still alive and well? And she's just a child at that. Rosen froze. That was the moment. She found out she was Hindley's second wife. Hindley? Rosen asked slowly, unable to process what she was hearing. What is she talking about? But instead of looking guilty, Hindley simply smiled casually. Well, he said calmly, I never thought I'd be introducing you two like this. Then he turned toward Emily. Say hello, Rosen. This is my daughter, Emily. So to tell you the story, a long time ago, a man and a woman fell in love. They were both young and loved each other dearly. However, there was one thing unusual about them. The woman was able to wield magic. You see, she was a witch. Most people feared witches and shunned them, but the man did not fear her. Instead, he praised her for her power and whispered to her that it made her special. He even gave her a beautiful pendant for her to wear around her neck. You might put yourself in danger if you can't control your magic, so wear this necklace at all times. Those were the sweet words the man whispered to her. The woman deeply loved the man who had accepted her for who she was, so she did everything he asked of her. Soon they were married, and the man opened a clinic using her powers. Although he lacked proper medicinal knowledge, her potions were extremely effective, so the clinic became crowded with patients every single day. The young couple soon amassed a small fortune in that little village. However, as the man grew richer, she only grew weaker. As time passed, the woman gave birth to a daughter, but the happiness lasted only a short while. The woman's health began to deteriorate after giving birth, and her powers weakened along with it. And that was when the man finally showed his true colors. He began abusing her, beating her, treating her cruelly. One day, the woman simply could not endure it any longer, so she ran away, taking her daughter with her. But she was weak, battling illness, and with her magic bound to the man through that pendant, she could not go very far. Before long, the man found them. In an effort to protect her ailing mother, the daughter tried to attack the man using the very magic she had inherited from her mother, and once the man realized his daughter was also capable of magic, he made her a proposal. If she helped him, he would let them live peacefully, and even help pay for her mother's medicine. The young daughter, desperate for money and wanting to save her mother, accepted the deal, and as instructed, she placed her mother's pendant around her own neck. Her mother, far too ill to understand what was happening around her, was unable to warn her daughter that she must never wear that pendant. Now sitting across from Hindley, Emily finally asked, "Tell me now. Who is this girl?" Hindley sighed irritably. "She's my second wife. Is that really so hard to understand?" Emily immediately stood up and slammed her fist onto the table. "You drained your first wife's power, beat her until she became bedridden, and now you have the audacity to take a second wife?" Her eyes trembled with fury. "How dare you!" Emily reached forward to grab his collar, but Hindley remained seated, calmly smiling faintly. Then suddenly, Emily flinched sharply, clutching at her neck. "Emily, my daughter," Hindley said quietly as he stood up. "Being my daughter, why are you so stupid, Emily stood there gripping her throat painfully. "It's about time you learned something." He stepped closer. "All this talking back to me, it only ends up hurting yourself." Outside the room, Rosen sat frozen, hearing the sharp slapping sounds from inside. She quietly covered her ears. Later that night, Rosen carefully opened the door to Emily's room. Emily immediately looked up in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Rosen didn't answer immediately. She simply walked inside, carrying medicine in her hands. "I'll leave this. Here," she said quietly. "Use it for your wounds." Emily sat there silently before clenching her teeth. "You're just as crazy as him," she said bitterly. Rosen looked at her quietly. "If you weren't," Emily continued angrily, "then how could you even marry an old man like that? You must be out of your mind." Her voice turned mocking. "What did he promise you? Jewelry? Whatever it was, you're no different from him. It disgusts me." Rosen's fist slowly tightened. "What do you even know about me?" she asked sharply. Emily frowned. "Do you have any idea what kind of life I had?" Rosen's voice trembled slightly as she continued. "I never knew my parents. I was abused in an orphanage. I worked like a maid every single day while worrying I might be sold off somewhere even worse. We slept like rats in freezing cold rooms. And every time I found something to eat, even stale bread, I was grateful for it." Rosen looked directly at Emily. "Do you really think I ever had a choice?" Then she slowly turned away. "It's true that I don't know about your past, but you have no right to treat me like that. You at least had a family growing up." And with those final words, Rosen quietly left the room. The next morning, Rosen felt uneasy. Last night, she had spoken her mind to Emily without holding back, but now worry slowly crept into her chest. What if Emily told everything to Hindley? "Good morning, Rosen." Startled, Rosen turned around as Hindley wrapped his arms around her from behind. Good morning." Then she hesitated before asking carefully, Where is Emily? Why do you ask?" Hindley asked casually as he sat down on the chair. Rosen lowered her gaze slightly. "Maybe she's still sleeping after all the beating I gave her last night." He sighed dramatically. "Sorry about that. You see, I didn't intend to go that far, but it couldn't be helped. That foolish girl tried to use magic on me." "Magic?" Rosen whispered in surprise. "Oh, you didn't know?" Hindley replied calmly. "She's a witch. She inherited it from her mother." Then he smiled faintly. "But did you notice the pendant around her neck?" Rosen slowly nodded. "I gave it to her because she can't control her own powers. If she takes it off," his eyes met hers, "she'll die." Then he quickly added with a gentle smile, "Oh, don't misunderstand, it's all for her own good." Rosen had only ever heard stories about witches and fairy tales, so hearing all this directly felt overwhelming. Hindley slowly offered his hand toward her. "But don't worry," he whispered softly. "You're a good girl. You're no danger to anyone." Rosen forced herself to calm down and gently grabbed his hand. "Yes, Hindley. I'm no danger to anyone." Hindley nodded in satisfaction before pulling her into his arms. "Yes," he murmured softly, "you're everything to me now. And honestly..." Rosen liked Hindley. At the very least, he complimented her, patted her head, and held her warmly in his arms. Of course, life with him wasn't all roses, but at least it was warm. Then Hindley suddenly informed her, "Emily is going to stay with us from now on. She has to work to pay for her mother's medicine." "But why?" Rosen argued lightly. "She said so many awful things to me." Hindley chuckled softly. "She's a little aggressive, but deep down she's soft." Then he leaned closer toward Rosen's ear. "And honestly, be grateful it's her instead of her mother, otherwise this house would become complete chaos." A faint grin appeared on his lips. "Though, it might have been entertaining watching my wives grow jealous of each other." Rosen flinched slightly. Jealous? Was she? But wasn't jealousy something people felt when they feared losing someone they loved? Rosen wasn't afraid of losing Hindley. She was only afraid of losing the home she had finally found. The four walls that protected her from the cold rain, the full pantry, the warm bed. But not Hindley. So there was no reason for her to dislike Emily, or Emily's mother. Inside the kitchen, Rosen noticed a plate of sandwiches sitting on the table. They were supposedly prepared by Emily. "Why did you make sandwiches for me?" Rosen asked curiously. Outside in the garden, Emily was sorting clothes to dry under the sun. "It was just leftovers," Emily muttered quietly. "But don't you hate me, Emily?" Rosen asked, following after her. "You were furious at me the other night, and now you're making me sandwiches?" She tilted her head slightly. Are you feeling guilty? It was for Hindley, Emily answered flatly. Rosen smiled knowingly. Oh, don't lie now. Anyway, I can't eat them. Hindley doesn't want me gaining weight. Emily immediately turned irritated. That's complete nonsense, she snapped. He eats like a pig and lounges around all day. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Then suddenly, remembering something, she asked eagerly, Emily, are you really a witch? Emily stared at her for a moment before quietly answering, yes. Rosen's face instantly brightened. That's so cool! But then why are you working here? She asked excitedly. Couldn't you just use magic? Emily looked at her silently before turning away. Stop talking nonsense and help me with the laundry. Rosen had finally met a real witch, but somehow it felt disappointing. In fairy tales, witches could do anything. They could fly, destroy everything they hated, change the world using magic. So had the great witch Valborg lost all her power over time? Rosen wondered about that quietly, because after all those desperate prayers to Valborg, all she received in the end was Hindley. Rosen sighed softly as she stood there. I guess it's not that great after all, she murmured. All it takes is a little necklace to stop you from using magic? Emily stayed silent for a moment before whispering quietly, I can still do some simple magic. Really? Rosen's eyes sparkled immediately. Then show me, please. She looked genuinely excited. Emily turned toward her in surprise. Why do you even want to see it? She asked quietly. I'm a witch. People are always afraid of me. That's the only reason I'm still staying with Hindley. She sighed bitterly. He annoys me like hell, but without his protection, what would happen to me and my mother? It doesn't matter whether war breaks out or not. The two of us can't survive alone. Emily looked away. Being a witch is a curse. Are you kidding me? Rosen immediately argued. It's magic. How could that ever be a curse? Then she clasped her hands together eagerly. Please, Emily, just show me once. Emily let out a tired sigh before slowly raising her hand, and in the next second, the water suddenly floated into the air. Rosen froze. What Emily showed her that day was the most magnificent thing Rosen had ever seen in her entire life. For that brief moment, she forgot everything. All her pain, Hindley, being trapped inside that house like a prisoner, even the loneliness that made her cry at night. And for the first time in a long while, Rosen felt certain she would finally have pleasant dreams tonight. But that very night, the sirens throughout the city suddenly went off. Rosen and Emily rushed out of their rooms in panic. Was that an explosion? Rosen asked nervously. Hindley still hadn't returned home. He had gone out earlier to buy supplies and never came back. The two hurried downstairs and quickly turned on the radio. Then, a young man's voice rang through the broadcast. People of the Empire and the people of Ryerton, this is the commander of the Ryerton Aviation Corps, Ian Connor. This is an air raid warning for the entire Ryerton region. This is not a drill. The Thalys aircraft are flying toward Ryerton at this very moment. Close your doors, gather your valuables, and head underground immediately. We are doing everything we can to keep you safe. Do not panic. I repeat, this is not a drill. This is an air raid warning for the entire Ryerton region. Everyone must take shelter underground. We are doing everything possible to protect you, and we will protect you with whatever it takes. Ian looked at the sleeping woman quietly. She had finally drifted off to sleep, even though she kept insisting she wouldn't fall asleep and continued talking endlessly. In the condition she was in, there was no way she could steal the keys from him. Honestly, Ian was surprised she had managed to stay awake and keep talking for that long. Then he felt her grip tighten slightly around his hand. In her sleep, Rosen murmured softly, I'm still awake, and it's just that I wanted to be loved. Ian flinched slightly at those words, but he quickly reminded himself there was only one reason she was telling him all of this. To convince him once again that she didn't do it, and he must not fall for it, because according to every report written about her, Rosen Walker was an artful and persuasive scammer, highly intelligent, dangerous. Must be careful not to be deceived when engaging in conversation. That was what every report warned him about. But then, why had she never told anyone this story before? If she had explained all this during the trial, no. Ian's eyes lowered quietly. Actually, it probably would have only convinced people even more of her guilt. Nothing would have changed except the added detail that the murder had been caused by abuse. And after everything she had suffered, how could she still consider him a hero? A man who failed to protect their hometown. Slowly, Ian slipped his hand free from hers, assuming she had fully fallen asleep now. Then he sat quietly beside the bed. He looked at her for a moment. Even sleeping on such a large, soft bed, she still looked uncomfortable. The sight strangely irritated him. She wasn't even cuffed anymore, so why was she still sleeping like that? Slowly, he reached out and checked her breathing. It was calm and steady, so she hadn't lied when she said she felt better. Still, he knew she would never survive long on the Isle of Monte. If she was going to die there in just a few days anyway, then Ian saw no problem in uncuffing her for now. After all, prisoners on death row were often granted final wishes too. This was simply another form of generosity. He only needed to keep her alive until they arrived at the Isle. That was his duty. But if he was truly honest with himself, was duty really his only reason? Ian slowly brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. I shouldn't have taken this job, he murmured quietly. because regardless of what everyone else in the Empire said, if there was one man who genuinely wanted to set Rosen Walker free, it was him. "What am I supposed to do with you, he whispered softly. It would have been much easier if he had simply been fooled by her lies. Or perhaps they should have never met in the first place. Ian slowly stood up, grabbing the cuff chains from the side. Then he glanced back at the sleeping Rosen. Deep down, he already knew this would happen the moment he first laid eyes on her. "Sir Ian Connor!" Henry's frantic voice suddenly pulled Ian awake. Ian slowly opened his eyes and looked toward Henry. But why did he look so horrified? And what was he even doing in the room in the middle of the night? Wait. Ian glanced toward the window. Morning light was already shining through. "When did I fall asleep?" "What time is it, Henry?" Ian asked groggily. Henry stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously worried about that right now?" he snapped. "That should be the least of your concern." "What are you even talking about?" Ian said irritably before his words suddenly trailed off. A strange tightness wrapped around his waist, his eyes slowly lowered, and widened instantly. A woman was sleeping peacefully against him, her arms tightly wrapped around his waist. The very cuffs he had picked up earlier were now locked shut, one around Rosen's wrist, and the other around his own. Meaning, technically, Sir Ian Connor had spent the night sleeping handcuffed to his prisoner. "Did something happen last night?" "What on earth did you do?" Henry's frantic voice echoed through the room. "No. Nothing," Ian replied hesitantly. "Then tell me what this is supposed to mean?" Henry demanded, pointing directly at the bed. His face looked completely horrified. "Are you seriously saying she just crawled into your bed without your knowledge?" Ian sighed and rubbed his forehead tiredly. Why had he fallen asleep here of all places? And like this too? "It's her bed," he muttered quietly. Then he glanced at Henry coldly. "And stop yelling, she's asleep." Henry looked even more shocked. "Please don't tell me this is what I think it is," he whispered dramatically. "Please, say something. Relax," Ian answered immediately. "It's nothing like what you're thinking." Then he added flatly, "And as you can see, we're both fully dressed." After saying that, Ian suddenly looked back at Henry. "And why are you here anyway? Didn't I tell you you're not allowed around her?" Henry scoffed loudly. "Like you have any right to say that right now." He pointed at Ian accusingly. "You're the last person who should be accusing me of anything. You're the one caught in bed with a prisoner." His expression twisted in disbelief. "What happened to the Ian Connor I know?" Ian stayed silent as he slowly unlocked the cuffs. Henry immediately noticed. "And what's with the cuffs?" he asked, completely confused. "Why did you cuff yourself to her? And why are you even unlocking them now?" Ian ruffled his hair in annoyance before taking a drag from his cigarette. "No reason," he answered calmly. "I'm just keeping watch." But Henry clearly wasn't satisfied with that answer. He grabbed the cuffs, preparing to lock them back onto Rosen again, when Ian's cold voice suddenly stopped him. "Henry." Ian looked directly at him. "Put those down." Henry stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously planning to keep her uncuffed? Have you completely lost your mind?" Ian took another slow drag before answering calmly. "She attempted suicide, and I have to keep her alive until we reach the Isle. So I told her not to try anything again, and she agreed. But in exchange, I promised to keep the cuffs off, and she promised to stay put." Henry looked absolutely unconvinced. "And you trust her? And how could she even hurt herself while wearing cuffs anyway?" "No," Ian answered bluntly. "I don't trust her." Then his expression darkened slightly. "But she's unpredictable. Yesterday we were only supposed to have dinner, right? Yet even with her hands cuffed." Ian slowly looked toward Rosen sleeping peacefully on the bed. "Did you already forget what happened?" Henry quietly lowered his gaze. After all, Rosen had specifically asked him for the Maria fruit, and Ian knew Henry still felt guilty about that. Finally, Ian broke the silence. "Anyway, why were you here?" Henry quickly remembered why he had come. "Oh, right. The captain said a school of magical sea monsters is crossing our path. Apparently there are a lot of them. They usually avoid large ships like this, but in the worst-case scenario, we might have to divert course." He sighed. "So we could arrive 1 or 2 days later than expected. The captain asked me to inform you so you could notify higher-ups." "I see," Ian answered quietly. Then he turned back toward Henry. "You can leave now if there's nothing else." Henry narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Are you sure I can leave the two of you alone together?" "Enough with the nonsense," Ian replied immediately. Only then did Henry finally leave the room. The cabin became quiet again. Ian slowly turned and looked at Rosen sleeping peacefully on the bed. If they arrived later than expected, then Rosen would have 1 or 2 extra days before reaching the Isle of Monte. Ian sighed heavily before sitting down on the floor beside the bed. Henry was right. He really must have lost his damn mind. Rosen, now awake, looked out the window. Just a moment ago the weather had been beautiful, but now heavy rain poured endlessly outside. Then her eyes shifted to the front of the room, and her brows immediately frowned, seeing the unwanted guest sitting there. Henry sat across from her calmly playing chess by himself. He moved another piece, and won again. Rosen stared at the board irritably before suddenly kicking it over with her foot. "Hey, what are you doing?" Henry shouted. Rosen glared at the overturned board in annoyance. Henry had brought this dumb game rich people played, and she didn't even understand the rules. It was unbelievably irritating. "You can leave now," she said coldly. "I want to rest." Henry glared back immediately. I'm not leaving you two alone together." Rosen's brows furrowed deeper. But it's so stuffy in here with this many people. Honestly, she couldn't even understand why Henry kept glaring at her so suspiciously. Meanwhile, his boss sat nearby silently reading a newspaper without even looking at her once. And it wasn't even today's newspaper. It was several days old. So why was he still reading it so seriously? Something was definitely strange today. That morning, Henry had arrived with breakfast, insisting he would eat together with them. Then afterward, he even brought this stupid chess game, saying he wanted to play with Rosen. What exactly is wrong with him? Rosen wondered irritably. Is this some new way to torture me? Henry sighed heavily. Sorry, but I'm not leaving this room. How could I possibly leave you alone with Sir Connor? Rosen looked at him sharply. What are you even talking about? And since when do you not trust your own boss? Henry slowly looked up. I did, until yesterday, but not anymore. Rosen frowned in confusion. What, did these two get into some kind of fight? But if they did, shouldn't they solve it themselves? Why drag her into it? Finally, Rosen let out a tired sigh. Look, it's really stuffy in here. Can I at least go out? Onto the deck for some fresh air? No, Henry answered immediately. It's raining outside. You could slip. Oh, please, Rosen whined dramatically, making a fake sobbing face. Henry scoffed loudly. Tears again? Seriously? Man, you're unbelievable. And what if someone recognizes you? Rosen winked playfully. Please, just for a little while. I promise I'll stay hidden. Henry's face only grew darker. When you asked for the Maria fruit, you also promised you wouldn't cause trouble. Then what happened? You collapsed, coughing blood. And now you expect me to trust you again? Rosen awkwardly rubbed the back of her neck. I'm done lying around, okay? And I promise, Sir Connor. Lies, Henry answered immediately. You tried to kill yourself. Rosen looked startled for a second. Then she slowly smiled. That's strange. I thought you wanted me dead. I figured you'd be happy to see me gone. Henry slowly looked up at her, his face suddenly pale. Then he lowered his gaze quietly. I've already killed enough people during the war. I don't want any more deaths on my hands. Rosen stared at him silently. Why was he making that kind of face? For a brief moment, she almost felt guilty. Should she apologize? No. Why should she? Cut the bullshit and let me out, she snapped sharply. A troubled Henry finally turned toward Ian. Sir Connor, the final decision is yours. Please choose wisely. Remember, she's capable of anything. For the first time in a while, Ian finally spoke. Henry, go fetch some alcohol. She said yesterday that she wanted a drink. Henry immediately sighed in annoyance, but eventually he stood up anyway. I won't take long, he muttered before leaving the room. Rosen looked at the shut door after Henry left. What's wrong with him today? She muttered irritably. It's just how he is, Ian calmly replied. He's like an untamed foal, so I have to keep him in line. Then, after a brief pause, he quietly added, after losing everyone, he's all I have left. Rosen looked at Ian silently for a moment before slowly stepping closer. Now that I think about it, this is unfair, she said. You've read all those newspaper articles about me. But I know absolutely nothing about you. She leaned slightly against the table. I can't even read properly, so all I could do was stare at your pictures. A small smile appeared on her lips. So the only things I know are that you're handsome and that you're a pilot. And honestly, that sucks. She stepped even closer, but Ian still kept his eyes on the newspaper. Seeing that, Rosen decided to try something else. Lightly tapping her foot against his shoe, she reached forward and pulled the newspaper down. Come on now, she complained. It's old. You already read it, so put it down and play with me. Ian finally looked up at her. Play with you, he repeated slowly. What exactly are you suggesting? Rosen smiled immediately. Last night she had learned one more thing about Ian Connor. No matter how cold or gruff he acted, he couldn't refuse her when she pestered him like a child. So Rosen quickly took advantage of that. She climbed onto the table right on top of the newspaper Ian had been reading. Then slowly, she reached out and lightly tapped his nose with her finger. You see, I like things to be fair, she said playfully. So let's start with basic personal information. She tilted her head. First question, how old are you exactly? Ian frowned slightly but still answered. 30. Rosen's eyes widened. Then how old were you when you were first appointed commander? The war began 10 years ago, Ian answered calmly. So do the math. Rosen blinked in shock. At 20, that's way too young. Ian quietly met her gaze. The higher-ups ran off. That only left me. The Air Force was already short on pilots because the few properly trained ones we had were dispatched to the capital. So the only people left in Riorton were U.S. cadets. They simply chose the best among us. My first flying corps consisted of 4 people, Illyria Lev, Violet Mihak, and Lucy Watkins. He paused briefly. And after we lost them in battle, Henry Reville, Sarah Riverin, and Mikhail Johnson. Rosen stared at him quietly. There were women in the Air Force? She asked in surprise. Yes, Ian answered immediately. Quite a lot, actually. There were many women participating in dangerous new fields during the war. They've just been forgotten. Then he sighed softly, almost as if realizing too late that he had spoken too much. Anyway, forget that. I shouldn't have said all this. Rosen silently looked at him. What the Empire had done truly was insane. They had thrown young cadets, children who had barely learned how to fly, straight into war. The famous Ryerton Flying Corps that people placed all their faith in were nothing more than students, and when they survived far longer than expected, the government simply turned Ian Connor into propaganda. For the first time, Rosen truly realized something. They had all been far too young to survive 10 years of war. I'm sorry for insulting your comrades before, Rosen said quietly. Like you said, I was only thinking about myself. Ian looked up at her. No, he answered after a moment. I was the one who spoke without thinking, so I should be the one apologizing. Rosen pressed her foot lightly against his again and smiled. You overthink too much. That's why you can't sleep. She tilted her head slightly. I'm just a mere prisoner. You don't have to apologize to me. Try loosening up a little more like I do. I only think about the immediate future. Ian quietly stared at her. Why are you saying this to me? He asked softly. Rosen smiled at him. Because I like you, so I want you to be happy. Isn't that what liking someone is about? Ian's gaze slowly lowered. Don't say things like that, he murmured. Like what? Rosen asked innocently. That you like me. Rosen suddenly leaned closer toward him. What? She whispered. Does that upset you? Ian stiffened slightly at the sudden closeness before quietly answering. No, that's not what I mean. He hesitated briefly. It's just, I don't deserve to hear those words from you. But answer my question. Rosen pressed again softly. Does it upset you? Ian sighed quietly. No. It just makes me uneasy, and I think you've forgotten what kind of situation we're in. Rosen looked directly into his face, and before even thinking, she leaned forward slightly and brushed her lips softly against his cheek. The sudden closeness startled even her. Did I go too far? With a faint blush, she instinctively pulled back a little, preparing to apologize. But when she looked at Ian, he simply looked startled. Slowly, he raised his hand to his cheek, lightly touching the warmth her lips had left behind. Rosen swallowed quietly. That was strange. He wasn't angry, he wasn't yelling, and more importantly, he wasn't pushing her away either. Gathering her courage again, Rosen slowly raised her hand and gently touched his face, his cheek, the edge of his lips. She kept telling herself she was only trying to seduce him, that none of this meant anything to her. And yet, for some reason, she couldn't take her eyes or hands off him. Suddenly, her wrist was caught by a larger hand. Rosen flinched and looked up into Ian's eyes. What are you doing? Ian asked quietly. Rosen laughed awkwardly, her cheeks faintly red. Oh, sorry, forget it. I wasn't trying anything weird. She looked away briefly before murmuring softly. It's just that I wanted to touch you. You look exactly like you did in those flyers. I almost couldn't believe you were real. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Well, at least you fulfilled one of my dying wishes. Dying wish? Ian repeated in confusion. Yes. My husband used to get really jealous of you. You see, I had a huge crush on you back then, so I hung your flyers all over the house, and that pissed him off. Rosen smiled bitterly. He screamed at me, saying a pathetic little thing like me could never even dream of getting close to someone like you. Then he beat me for it. She laughed quietly to herself. Life really is funny, isn't it? Look where I am now. It still doesn't feel real. I can't believe I'm actually sitting here in front of the great Ian Connor, touching you like this. As she spoke, her voice slowly trailed off because the hand that had caught her wrist earlier was now gently wrapped around her cheek instead. Rosen looked startled, but Ian didn't pull away. He quietly held her gaze, his hand slowly moving across her face, her cheek, her lips, her eyes. Hey, what are you? Rosen tried to speak, her face growing warmer. Ian's lips slowly parted, his gaze still fixed on her. But before he could finish, the door suddenly swung open. Rosen! Little Lila rushed inside excitedly. Are you feeling better now? And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.